Yes.
Finance Committee meeting on August 9th, 2023. We are done with our regular business and we're moving into our budget presentations. And today, first up, we have Emergency Management and Homeland Security. So welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tom Hardesty. Thank you again for giving us the opportunity to come before you. I have with me today Mike Crum, who is the Chief from Building Safety, Rob Seeley, who's the Chief on the Emergency Management side, Angie Jans, who is our internal financial clerk, and then Joanne from Fiscal Services, our Fiscal Services rep is here also. So if we get into some digital things that we don't know, numbers offhand, they can assist us with that. So I did want to take a moment, for the next one. Give you one job.
It's not moving for them.
Oh, it's not, here, let me try. Now try. Here you go.
Just a reminder for those, I know we have some commissioners with more time, some with less, that a couple of years ago with some reorganization, building safety was moved from facilities and maintenance into a department that is now emergency management and homeland security. So we have the two divisions with building safety and emergency management. The one thing you might find as you look through the budget is financially, building safety is still within the FM&O budget. FM&O is an enterprise fund, emergency management is under the general fund. So while we operate managerially with one department, the budgets are actually split between the two.
Well, that's gotta be fun.
So it causes some challenges, but fortunately, you know, we have a very close relationship with facilities, so we work through it. But just so you see that. Building safety, responsible for on-campus items such as, they do have a 24/7 dispatch. I know we think of the 911 center with the sheriffs, but safety has a 24/7 dispatch as well. And Mike will touch on some of the details of that. But it's handling non-911 type incidents more related to county operations. And they answer for water resources, Rochester Hills, DPW, FM&O, us after hours, those kind of things. They're maintaining and operating more than 3,000 cameras, access control, alarms, and then emergency management, as we said, supports both county operations and local communities during emergencies and disasters. Most of ours, we'll get into some of our KPIs, most of ours fall under the strategic goal of organizational excellence. The reason with that is our services directly to the public are somewhat minimal, and we'll touch on those today. Most of our services get into supporting cities, villages, and townships so that they can serve their communities, or supporting other departments within the county. For example, during the pandemic, emergency management is not putting shots in arms. They are, however, finding vaccine sites, finding, equipment, supplies, schedule, a lot of those things that support that, coordinating with other departments for the support reasons. So they're not the primary one, they're the one organizing and planning for that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike to touch on building safety. We'll do that first.
Thank you. As Director Hardy said, Mike Crum here with the Building Safety Division. And up on the screen, we have one of our KPIs that we're working. And I do believe I came to this body earlier this year and talked about access control upgrade. And so it's both a KPI and it's something we'll talk today during our budget process. The funding for it will come out of the capital improvement plan, and that was what we brought to you earlier. But we will upgrade those cards we have, the magnetic strip cards that have the black line on the back that we're all familiar with, to a proximity card technology, so it's contactless that we can utilize. It also increases our security through the enhanced encryption that we'll have. And we'll go from 37-bit to 48-bit, just makes it a little bit more secure for all of us here on Complex. And there's some future things we can do with it with Bluetooth technology and with the codes that we can put in there. So currently, we have 26% of our card readers on Complex are updated to a proximity system. There's approximately 1,100 card readers on Complex that we utilize, and that's not counting the gate that we came in earlier today to get into the parking lot and some of the other areas that we have, just the card readers on the doors, it's about 1,100. And so we have ordered those, they're on the way here, and we'll start to increase those numbers from 26% throughout the next few months. We wanna make sure everybody was aware of those. Oops.
Are those in specific buildings with specific populations of people that you're doing this with? So that 25% of all of these, they're not just randomly around the county, they're in this pocket and this group of people? Is that how you're
It's a great
doing it?
question, yeah, it's a great question. So it does create some challenges with, we have to update your card. We have to do, so we started with some of the outlying buildings and then the sheriff's office, so that they had to have access to all of the different buildings on complex. Now that those are complete, that's our 26%, we're starting to go with the buildings on complex. And then we've come up with a plan so that we can get you a new card and then use the buildings of the least impact on as we go forward. So for example, if we use the EOB first, the executive office building first, everybody comes to that building. And so if you didn't have the new card, you wouldn't be able to access the building. So that may be one of the last buildings we do because of all the traffic that comes into the building. This building is another one. There's a lot of traffic inside of this building. So it's very large, the logistics of this building. It will be a little later down the line as we update everybody's cards throughout the county,
Okay, but you're doing the people and the building
all at the same time,
at the same time, gotcha.
all at the same time.
Okay.
Absolutely. Our next KPI I wanted to go over was our communication center. So we do have a 24/7 dispatch center, communication center, and it's, everyone's familiar with the sheriff's office and their 911 dispatch center. Not so familiar with our communication center. It does operate on a 24/7 basis as we indicated. The numbers up behind me are the numbers of calls they take per month, and they average around 3,800 or 3,900 calls a month inside of our center. And a lot of those, most of those calls are on the graph behind me. Water Resource Commission is our largest area that we handle. And so in the daytime, we're handling their staff, and as they are doing maintenance and we're tracking and updating what they're doing. After hours, it's the citizens of Oakland County that are calling if there's any issues. And then our internal staff is responsible for contacting WRC personnel and making sure they can handle whatever the incident is for the residents of Oakland County. It's a large percentage of the county that is covered by WRC. And so that we do handle those anything at 4 p.m. until when they open back up in the morning. The FMNO calls behind us, that's the same, it's the after hours maintenance calls. So if there's something leaking or something, we'll contact the FMO personnel, have them come in and take care of whatever the topic is. And then the rest of them are the different areas the Homeland Security and Health and Rochester Hills. Rochester Hills is our one outside area that we handle, so we have an independent contract with Rochester Hills. We are their after hours contact for their personnel.
Just for their DPW.
For their DPW, I'm sorry, for any water related incidents. Any questions on, yep, go ahead.
Mr. Cabell.
I don't understand like any of this. So what does, no, you're fine.
Sorry.
I'm glad you're doing it. What does WRC call your emergency? Like this is like the hard box facility that you
It's a
have, right?
this is non-emergency.
Yeah,
Um,
what do they call for?
So primarily after hours, our calls will be grinders. So are you familiar with Grindr?
No.
I wasn't either when I started here in Oakland County. So a grinder is an independent system that some of the homes will have that it goes to the grinder before it goes into sanitation. And I don't wanna say any more than that, I have to ask our WRC how it actually works. If the grinder isn't operating properly, it will backflow into the home.
Yeah.
And so that grinder alarm will go off, that resident will call our staff calls WRC personnel to come out and make sure that happens before it does any damage to a residence. That's one example that
Okay.
we would go for. Anytime the water's not working,
Yeah.
any issues they're having, they'll call us. But the ones that we really gotta get on fast are these grinders or some of the other
storms, during large, if you see the spike in some of his data, that's from storms, storm sewers back up. Whatever you would call your DPW or water resources for after hours, they're answering the phone then they have the on-call list for those
we-
groups.
So then we contract with Rochester Hills? to
They
do
contract
that?
with us,
So how,
they pay.
right, does it generate, it generates revenue, but does it generate like a margin for us? Or is it like it folds around?
Rochester Hills listing.
Okay, yeah, right, I see, yeah,
They more than cover the costs, yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Why do we not do this with every other city?
Those that would have an interest, we would be open to discussing. So Mike and I have talked about that a little bit. We haven't, we're not trying to take
Yeah.
work from some other dispatch
Sure.
center somewhere, but it would be an available option if someone were looking for that.
Okay.
So if somebody is in a community and they have a backup, they might call their city, right?
So most of the customers know if WRC is their primary responder or, I used to work for Auburn Hills. They had their own water department in city, so they would call. When I was there, Auburn Hills had a 24/7 dispatch, so they would call Auburn Hills. But most of the customers, they know where they get their water bill from. That number is, when they call that number after hours, it's going from WRC and getting
Okay.
routed
That's
to
what they
safety.
know then.
Okay,
Does
That's how they know.
WRC give you money for this? You have a contract with
it's
them
an
that generates
enterprise
revenue?
fund.
It is
Yeah.
internal, although I will let fiscal answer how that works.
I'm sure they charge back and forth.
I know there are inter-service charges, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think,
There is with them, there is with, actually even with FM&O, there is.
I think we can follow up with WRC to get a better answer, but I think it's an internal service charge. But we can get back and answer that question.
Internal service meaning there wouldn't be a margin? Or it would be somehow subsidized through general fund or something, or?
I think it's through their drain equipment labor, which is an internal service charge. But
Like it
We'll
would, you're saying that because you think it'd be a lower amount than maybe the true cost?
that I don't know, we'd have to
Okay.
get back to you on that.
I don't know what the number is offhand, but it's fairly significant from WRC.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Well, cause if, WRC, most of their money, right, enterprise funds, that's the way to say that? Most of WRC's money comes from ratepayers, right? So we only
Right.
give them like
Right.
3% of their budget or something. So if, no disrespect to WRC, right, but if they're
Well,
getting a
it's-
deal,
it's
that's
sort of like
cool,
IT
but
It is
though,
something we have,
where IT services Homeland Security and you pay them through a, what do we call it,
Reimburse the cost of providing
Like-
that service.
where's our analysts? What do we, you wanna help us with that?
So, well, first of all, I didn't quite catch the original question, so.
So how does Homeland Security get paid by WRC? Isn't that what you're asking?
Basically, yeah. So like Rochester Hills is one example, or Health Department, these are all like revenue generating contracts, right? So if it costs $100, if it costs $1 a call, and there's a contract that says each call is $1.
Rochester Hills, yes. Health Department, no. Health Department is an Oakland County internal.
Okay.
So that's gonna fall in.
Okay.
Rochester Hills is an independent
Since
contract,
they're, okay.
just separate.
So do
Water
we,
Resources is semi, there is an amount of money. I know we've looked at it within the last 2 years and felt that it was reasonable, like we're not supplementing 50% of the cost of them, but I will admit, I don't know that exact number offhand to say whether
Okay.
it's 100%, 95 or 105.
You know,
Yeah, Chair, I think the question might be, so this is calls for services that come into the Homeland Security. So I think it's maybe, let's understand this graph a little bit more. Those might be WRC calls related to WRC. Would you guys forward that to the WRC?
So then they're handling the on-call, so they're reaching out to WRC Now it's also, that's not the only work they're doing, so it's not only, it's not,
So it's-
okay, WRC is 50% of the phone calls, they should pay 50% of the bill.
Sure.
There are other duties that those dispatchers are doing.
So the services that Homeland Security and Building Safety provide are probably budgeted that would cover that particular service of addressing the phone calls.
Right.
I don't think it's gonna be anything of, we got 29,000 calls or something, I can't read the numbers,
Yeah.
for your specific department, so we're gonna charge you for it. You're setting up the budget for that department to provide that service. Those are just the calls that come in related to what the constituency is calling about.
Right. And so then I'm begging the question, is that something to look into or think about as a, considering that WRC spend, most of their money comes from outside the county and right there like a pseudo county they're definitely a county partner and all that sort of thing and a county entity, but like it's different than the health department, right? The health department is like 1,000% county unit of government. But WRC gets most of its, its budget's like $400 million or something, and we give them like 8. So can some of that,
Yeah.
if we're looking for revenue, that's all I'm saying.
I think it's reasonable to say, are they paying their fair share?
Yeah.
And that we evaluate it continuously to make sure that based on the
Okay.
usage that they're paying their fair share. Is that
Yeah,
a fair
And
statement?
it is a fair share.
So
Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying the last time we examined it, we did feel that it's probably been more than a year, and we can look at that again.
Well, and I think with a lot of the enterprise funds within Oakland County, they do pay an indirect cost.
Mm.
So it's all of the
Okay.
services that we provide, like fiscal services, corp counsel or whatever.
Yeah.
So the enterprise funds do have an expenditure line item called indirect cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's the services that we provide to them. So, so then, yes, WRC would pay
Cool.
an indirect cost,
Okay.
basically back to the general fund for the
Understood.
services that we provide, whether it be M&B, Homeland Security, and whatever
Whatever.
else, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
We beat that one to death. Okay.
And so the last slide that I have for you today is another KPI, but as we're moving forward is our alarm systems. And just so that everyone, make sure that we're all aware of the future projects we're working on, it's also something we've requested from the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. And we want to convert the current dialer alarm system to an IP-based system. And so the dialer system, it was installed in 2001. The typical lifespan would have been 15 years, so we're gonna upgrade that now a little past that time. One of the benefits, in addition to just being that we can't get parts for the current system, is it will reduce our telecommunication contracts, and those costs are going up quite significantly as we're looking in the future. They've already let us know that those are gonna at least double, is what we've been told. And it would allow for some remote troubleshooting. It would increase our efficiency. So right now, if we have an issue with an alarm, say at Red Oaks and Madison Heights, we would have to send personnel from here down there to fix it and come back. Somebody could fix it at their desk in 5 minutes. And so we're looking forward to networking that, increasing our efficiency with this program. But it's also motivated by there's no longer parts that we can get. We're actually taking current parts to make it work with what's still here. So that's something that we're working on both with the KPI and then in our budget as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
The next one here, Yad, we wanted to touch on an initiative this year that will have a small piece in the upcoming budget. So we rolled out a few months ago the behavioral threat assessment and management team. This is part of a whole workplace safety initiative. You will hear these mentioned a lot with schools. It's a big thing. Mike and I were both involved in these in our past lives with schools. But we brought this to the workplace. It's an ever-expanding topic for workplace safety across the country. So this is it's a systematic process, and it's designed to focus on behaviors. Unfortunately, there are now hundreds of cases of workplace violence, active shooter, those type of things that there's data from now. And the data tells us that in more than half of the workplace cases, there were indicators and behaviors ahead of time. This isn't profiling. This is a, TV show, a 28-year-old white male who lives in his mother's basement. This is focusing on behaviors and what these people have done in the past, which can be indicators. It's not a predictive model either. It's not going to tell us, oh, this person will be a shooter. But it does hope to give us places and people because of behaviors that we hopefully can intercede on before something happens. And it's not only about injuring others, it's also, we look at it as a suicide prevention. The fear is that somebody's gonna hurt somebody, whether it's themselves or someone else. So we have a diverse team that has gone through training for this involving human resources, DEI, risk management, sheriff's office, psychologists from court services, as well as safety and myself. So like I said, we've just had this for a few months. There are, I think, around $30,000 that HR has actually within their budget to continue training and conferences for this group. We're even looking at there's beginning to be some certifications available out there now. So we'll continue to develop this out. And again, the goal is just continuing to provide a safe work environment for employees, visitors, contractors here at the county. And so with that, we'll turn it over to Rob for emergency management.
All right. You can go on. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk about 3 KPIs really quickly. The first one is our Oak Alert users, the number of Oak Alert users that we have in the county. We currently have a system that is powered by Code Red that is called Oak Alert that we use for emergency notification of citizens in Oakland County when weather strikes. Currently, we have 15,695 registered users. When we switched to Code Red about 3 years ago, we were down around 11,000. We've increased that since then. So last year at this time, we had about 14,276. And we're slowly working through different measures to try and get that number to increase. We're advertising not only on our website and through Facebook and through some other platforms, but we're trying to get possibly some billboards up and to increase some advertising on how people can do that.
Commissioner Long.
Just real quick, can you send that to us, cause we can post it on our individual?
Absolutely.
Cause I'm not even signed up for that, so I'd like to post it on my Facebook and then people,
And we've had some very good meetings with the communications group now, again, looking for their expertise to help.
just to bump it up, we could all try to.
This message.
Yeah, just if you can send us all, maybe the whole board, just email with that information, how to sign up, we can do it on our social
We have a
media
little
too.
QR code we'll send you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cavell?
So that, was Oak Alert part of or affiliated with the
It's really good.
air quality alerts?
Yeah.
Because,
We did send out Oak Alert
Yeah.
messages on the air quality alerts, yes, we did.
okay, great.
All right, the second one up there, we have been, through the new administration, we have been making sure that the management and leadership in Oakland County is trained in Oakland Emergency Operations Center procedures. And what we do when we come into the Emergency Operations Center, that has been a KPI, and we're currently in the process, we're gonna move that back into the background a little bit now. We now have 66 out of 70 identified leaders and managers in Oakland County that have been trained. We are doing one-on-one training with leaders and managers as they come into the county. Recently with the new IT,
CIO.
the new CIO in IT was trained in it. So we're now maintaining that and we're gonna move that into the background.
With
Our-
turnover, it's somewhat constant that we're
Yeah.
keeping people.
Our last one is about our outdoor warning sirens. Our daily uptime on our outdoor warning sirens is in excess of 99%. Oakland County has 276 outdoor warning sirens that we maintain. And in maintaining those 276 sirens, we also do installs on sirens if communities would like new sirens installed in their communities at a 75-25 cost share. So that way, if a community wants to put new sirens in their community, we can assist them with that. And we do maintain all of the sirens. We're the only ones that can set off the sirens in the county. We set them off for the whole county when we do it. And the next slide, actually.
It's such a big county that sometimes, you'll get that warning and it's blue sky overhead, right?
Yes, ma'am, and that happens
It's
quite a
okay.
bit, yeah.
That's our opportunity to message and say what the siren is telling
Right.
you,
Yeah.
seek a safe
Figure it
place
out.
and get more information.
Right.
Find a news progress, find
Right.
something that will then give you that further detail.
Right.
sign up for Oak Alert so we can tell you what it is.
That's why I wanted that stuff, that's what I
think they're
was
great.
thinking, the Oak Alert.
Commissioner
Quick question, what
Hoffman?
does a siren cost?
It varies based on the site, on average around $18,000 to $20,000 for a new install from beginning to end. But if it's a very difficult site to access, it could be a little more. If it's one that happens to be in an easy accessible road right away, then less.
Okay, thank you.
And occasionally we have them. Last year we had a siren in Commerce Township that was hit and destroyed. We had to replace that siren, and that was the same cost to replace that siren, so.
And then
Hit by
risk
a car?
management seeks, and then risk management will seek,
Yeah.
reimbursement from insurance.
Those drivers.
So last year we came to this body and asked for $150,000 a year for 3 years to improve our siren system in Oakland County. A lot of the older sirens had steel cabinets. Those steel cabinets are failing because they have heavy batteries in them and the makeup of the cabinets. We're switching those over now upon approval of that amount. We're switching them over to aluminum cabinets, which have about a 50-year lifespan. We were lucky to get the company that we deal with, West Shore out of Elmont, Michigan, actually has a contract with several nuclear power plants. They were able to go to a nuclear power plant that they were decommissioning in North Carolina and take all of the sirens that they took off of those poles, and we have purchased those at a big savings to the county. They're full of life. They're almost brand new, and we are going to be installing those. The company is currently doing the installations on those in the first year. We expect, because of that cost savings, to be able to finish the project about a year to a year and a half early at a savings to the county of about $200,000.
Excuse me, thank you.
I have a question from
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Rahman.
Oh, no, I'll wait till the end,
Oh,
sorry.
you wanna wait till the end?
Do you see me?
And I do see you.
Okay. I was like, waiting.
Commissioner Smith-Charles too. Do you wanna go now?
Yeah, no, it's fine. I do echo the part about the keypads because we were just at a door that we couldn't access earlier today. And it's supposed to be like our Fallout location. You can get to it, so that could be
It'd be nice if that was a keypad.
yes, it'd be very nice if that was a keypad. Straight away, as they say. My question was about professional development. I was trying to find the line item for that because I feel like what you do is just so important and I mean security, all that good stuff. And the only thing I saw that likens to it would be in-service training, which is pretty much zeroed out. Because I'm really big on PD.
We are,
Just for the
394.
finance. Yeah, just
we
for
are,
your
we are
finance.
fortunate, particularly for two reasons. One, especially on the emergency management side, nearly every FEMA, all of those development classes are free. Generally, the cost is attending. And then a lot of our Homeland Security, that type of training, we've been able to get grants for. So that will come out of Homeland Security grants. So we haven't had to budget as much money. There's also, on the safety side, has been able to take advantage of, there's money in our budget, but there's also HR training funds. So we have $12,000 in human resources. So it's a bucket for us, but it's in their line item, it takes their approval. So safety takes heavy advantage of that. We use some of it on the EM side, but because a lot of their classes are free, we're using it more on there. So it does allow us that professional development. One of the things that Mike has done since he's been here, I don't know the exact number he can say, of dispatchers that are now have the same certification that you'll find in the ones in a 911 center, APCO certification.
The 7th one, so all 7 will have it in about 20 days. So the last one is in the class right now.
Nice,
And they'll all be certified, telecommunicator 1 certified.
thank you. Thank you.
All right, and my last thing is, in this budget, we're asking to add one position that's currently being paid as a contractor. He has been working for the county for 3 years as a contractor. He's been running our warehouse, our COVID warehouse, which has been changing as COVID is kind of waning a little bit. We are currently working to maintain a stock of PPE in case another pandemic were to hit us, not only for the county, but also for the cities, villages, and townships in the county. We are also maintaining vaccination support items for the health department, and we have a large area that's full of vaccination support items, not only for things that put shots in arms, but also that can run a vaccination clinic, so tables and chairs and that type of thing. Those items we are currently using at the airport this last weekend. We brought all of the tables and chairs we have in the warehouse out there to allow them to use it. The sheriff's offices use them for outdoor gatherings that they've had. We also hired we bought several tents during COVID. Those tents are being used by Parks and Rec for those kinds of events as well. We currently, last year in the budget, we took over the incident management team from Mavis 3201. That incident management team has 6 vehicle units that we are now storing in the warehouse as well, including a large incident support vehicle, which is a 40-foot long Kenworth, basically semi-truck that we're storing in that warehouse space now as well. So we're using for different things other than COVID storage. In that position, we are changing from a contracted position to a full-time Oakland County position under ARPA funding for a year. So that way he can start getting benefits, and it's not at a cost increase. The benefits over what we were paying for the contracted service. So so we're switching him to a full-time.
It would actually be about $2,000 less cost
Yeah.
over that period of time, yet this person ends up with benefits as opposed to not, so.
So the previous person we had was a contractor.
No, it's the same person.
It's the same person.
The same person,
We're just
bringing
asking to
them
switch
on
them
as a-
from,
as a
instead of
full-time
us
employee.
paying that 38% to NTEC, that money went towards benefits. So it's a benefit to him, really, is what it is.
And the
So, but where I'm going with this is you paid him by ARPA funds. Are we gonna continue, you're
Yes,
asking us to do it?
It's still ARPA funded, so it's not an impact on the general fund, but it still is on the books adding a position. So the impact of the general fund is 0, but it's still adding a position.
Right, so ARPA's not gonna be forever.
Correct.
Is this a position that we see
It's a sunset.
sustain, oh, it is a sunsetting position,
Yes, it is.
okay.
Oh, when?
At the end of 2024. And part of what we're doing right now, I met with health this week, is having to evaluate going forward. What is our stockpile need to look like? You know, we certainly don't want to be where we were when the pandemic hit, but we also don't, need to store 2 years worth of, what should that look like? And we'll be going forward to the administration with recommendations that we likely would next year, if there's some changes that we think are needed, would come through there, but we'll be working through those recommendations to administration over the next 6 to 9 months. So right now it's sunsetted, it will end in the end of '24.
Anybody else have any other, Commissioner Rahman has a question.
So I actually have 3 questions. The first one is, for all the increased technology we're talking about, is that gonna require considerable IT support?
We get a lot of support with IT, and it only goes, everything does increase. So I'll use the mention of the access control and alarm system. Safety was set up before any of us were here. It had its own network, which at the time it was installed, my understanding was very good and probably ahead of IT. But since that time, IT has moved well beyond, and safety is still on a network from 2009. So what we've been working with, there's a lot in the background when we talk about making these alarms so that we can see what's happening in the court there. It's an integration with IT. So working to make these systems not just within safety's network, but so that we're working with IT and working together. So the answer there is yes, that it certainly involves integration with IT.
And from a cost standpoint, that's contained, or I don't know, because again, I know IT will be presenting to us afterward, and I have my own set of questions for IT. But just from a cost containment standpoint, I don't know how that's allocated or budgeted or how any of that works.
Well, so I won't try to answer their question, but basically they look at projects and they have a kind of a finite number of hours and projects that are available. And then we have work groups that prioritize those projects. So, right now access control is a high enough priority that it fits within those hours. And then, so that's how and that's one of the reasons, we can't do all of these at once. We have to do them over time.
Of course. Next question was, I noticed if in the budget, so the amended plan, I think the revenue had gone up from, let's call it 659,000 to 999,000. So it's gone up considerably, which is largely from federal operating grants. So I wanted to ask about that. So I guess the first question is, where do we foresee that, for fiscal year 2024 and beyond? And whether that's tied to all of this ARPA stuff as well.
So, could you hit the next slide?
Yep.
Because it will the budget history is only a couple of years old, as the department formed in 2021 and has significant impact from COVID. A big chunk of some of these jumps are FEMA related. We expend money and then we get reimbursement from FEMA for things. So now we're starting to see reimbursements now. So I'll touch on this first and then some other grants. So the slide you have in front of you shows we have submissions out to FEMA for over $12 million. We've actually only received cash in hand electronically a little over 1.7 million. And we have various states of approval. Depending on the size of the project, it could go from the state to FEMA and another FEMA and to the state and back, or it might just go to FEMA and the state. But we have over 10 million in various states of approval with FEMA, and over 6 million that we actually have signed grant agreements from the state. We're waiting for them to finalize and transfer payment. So it's entirely possible that this next year, you'll see a huge jump in our revenue. There could be $5, $6, $7 million that comes in. And then we have other grants. We do focus on a lot of grants and we can get them. The study for the new public safety EOC storage facility, we received a $450,000 grant to help pay for part of that design process. Our budget on the emergency management side isn't that large. It's only like 2.3 million. So 500,000 will show great jumps in our revenue. So it can be, the reality is the more disasters we have, the more you'll see from us.
Makes sense. So the amount up there has already been spent, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and similarly for contracted services, it's probably the corollary to what you just mentioned. Same type of thing, it was $2 million spent in fiscal year 22, 23 was the amended budget, it was 500,000 for 23, but then nothing for 24 and beyond. Is that?
Yeah.
That is partially from the FEMA grant and for COVID, and it's money that we're supposed to be receiving for all of the vaccinations. We did free vaccination sites, and that's the cost of that plus the warehouse cost. So that money will be moving into ARPA. So that's what that big sum is.
Okay. Got it. And then, sorry, one last question. As commissioners, how do we play a role in everything you just talked about? So I'm relatively new to the position, I've only been here 7 months. But one thing that's always been in the back of my mind is, God forbid there's a disaster tomorrow or some emergency hits. As an elected official, what is my role, my responsibility, my interplay with your department, if at all?
So we are going to communicate directly with the county executives, and part of that, Walt Herzog and that here earlier are then often in direct communication with the chair whenever emergencies that are happen. The commissioners are very helpful in helping us, like you said, get the message out on Oak Alert, getting people involved, getting people aware of the things that they can do to prepare and understand. One of the sometimes when there's disasters, how that process works. So when something happens, for instance, there was some urban flooding, an expectation that people are going to get money to fix their homes. Oftentimes, that's a very high bar to get to. Generally, it's if a government has a significant cost, or understanding that there are things like insurance that have to go first. So when those things happen, there's messaging that we can get out that we would certainly love to have you help us get to your constituents. But generally, our office is going to communicate to the county executive, and then they're going to communicate to the board.
One of the ways that the commissioners help and always have in the past is like when we had the Oxford shooting. Commissioner Spiz has been very instrumental working with our office in the community, helping to bring leaders together, helping to bring people from the community together, and helping the community to recover. And now we're in long-term recovery. We have recovery center that's opened up in Oxford, and he's been instrumental in helping that to run and helping with clear pathways with congressional leaders and with local leaders to help that recovery to happen. So it's another way that we'll look to commissioners when a disaster strikes.
And that's a great example, yeah, you have something in your district where you're familiar with the residents, familiar with local leaders.
Sure.
And they have confidence in you because they know you.
Sure. You answered my question. So we don't have necessarily direct communication with your department. It comes through the executive and then communications to get back to us.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have about just under 5 minutes to go, so if you have more slides, let's.
That was the last one. I wanted to keep you updated, you know, FEMA in particular. The pandemic is technically considered over. The reality is our office will have at least another year of working on financials and paperwork. You know, for example, you know, PPE that we bought, you couldn't buy it in bulk. We were literally buying, you know, 20 masks at a time. Well, every single one of those receipts has to be tracked from how it was ordered, what it was purchased with, how was it paid for, do we show that it was paid for, the bank, you know, it's us, it's fiscal, it's the treasurer's office. So every single one of those, so it's a lot of time and effort by a lot of people to get to this point for the reimbursement. So the clinics might be closed, but our staff will be ongoing. Rob mentioned the Oxford incident. Yes, the shooting and the direct is over. Now that long-term planning, long-term support, that's again where we're not providing counseling services. We're trying to make sure that the right people got together and plan for that. So the long-term work in the background is what we're often doing.
Yeah, we really appreciate what you do. We're glad you're there. And, you know, you made your presentation very easy to follow, which I appreciate.
Thank you. The board has always been very supportive of us. Obviously, we can't be that resource for the communities without the board's support, without the administration's support. Both of them have given us. And you know, and I get to sit up here and listen to you, but really it's the staff that execute these things and get them all done and are working with all these people. And it's, for both departments, it's a total of 48 people. It's not a great number of people, but they really get a lot done.
And it's really important, the point that you made about the details, because we're gonna be looked at very closely as Oakland County and having $244 million of ARPA money, where it went, how we spent it, and did we do it right? And you have so much small detail that you're responsible for in all of that. You know, we appreciate how much of a effort that's gonna be and that you're on top of it, because we don't wanna, you know, in the end of 24, beginning of 25, have the feds rain down on us for all these inaccuracies and so on. And so we appreciate you're on top of it now.
Receipts.
Well, and our goal is to get as much as we can from FEMA.
Right.
Clearly, with 12 million and 10 in approvals, we didn't get it all. So then we, in conjunction with fiscal, some of that was CARES Act would cover or ARPA covered. But our goal was to try to get as much reimbursement from one source or another as we could.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice job.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
coming today.
Thank you.
Okay, so emergency management is in the bucket.
10 minutes.
We're good there.
2-minute break.
You
Based
wanna
on,
break? A 2-minute
based on
break?
this.
Oh, is that, what time is it?
2:40 for,
It's 2:31. So what time is our next one? 2:30?
2:40.
2:40, okay, so we have 9 minutes.
Go to the bathroom.
Yes, which is
Bathroom?
exactly where I'm heading.
Bathroom. I got my pages up already and my presentation for IT up. I'm ready.
What is it here?
Oh, page on this one, cause it's a
Dietary.
yeah, 491. Yeah, I didn't look in the little one yet. I don't have that open yet. Oh, but I might have wrote it down, cause I took my time, look at my page. My page Thanks.
Department, welcome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my second time here today. I guess I'll try to make it as painless as possible, although it's IT, so.
We'll try to make it as painless
It's
as
rife,
possible.
rife with pain. It's rife with pain. All right. Stick with IT and see if I can work the clicker.
It's not you, I think it goes
It's
to
us.
I think it's because I clicked on the mic.
Yeah.
So I just clicked back, you should be good.
Okay, there we go.
Ooh, 5.
All right, so I guess we'll just jump right into the presentation. I guess just a quick confession before we start. Two quick confessions, but one of them, so we got the template. I had a little bit of challenge with the template because I was trying to find a perspective for the presentation. So a lot of the work of IT really is through other departments, and I think that you hear about those projects, and I think they can represent them better than I can. So a lot of this is what I call IT for IT. So it's back-end upgrades, it's desktop upgrades, it's cybersecurity stuff. We can talk about the other things, but the focus of the slides is mostly kind of the back office-y IT stuff. So I guess apologies in advance for that if that's not what you're looking for. So I think Hillary may have mentioned previously that we've got this initiative in the county executive's office for KPIs. So these are the 5 that we have for IT. And some of these are new. I've tweaked some of these, I think, to try to get maybe a different slant on things. But customer sat. So we're going to send out a survey to kind of measure customer satisfaction. I've had some informal feedback that we have some amount of improvement that we need to make there. So I've got that at the top of my list since, I gave kind of a presentation to the staff a couple months ago about objective good and perception of good, and both of those things are important. So, IT, there's a piece of it that is a customer service organization, so I want to make sure we're doing what we can to get better there. The next 2 are cybersecurity metrics, so average technical security risk per device. So we have some software that gives us a score. The score mostly is a measure of, how old is the thing and are we keeping it up to date with security patches? And then is it externally facing or internally facing? And so that gives us kind of a ballpark measure of how much risk are we carrying internally in the technical stack. And the cybersecurity training, so many folks I think have probably seen Blake and the training that we do, that we send out every month. So we have a measure of that. We also do periodic phishing tests and see if people are clicking on the link. The past several I think have been pretty good, not a lot of clicking. The last 2 are more project focused, so percent of IT activity on innovation versus run. As we kind of look at the volume of work that the IT department is doing, a lot of it is support. A lot of it is break fix. A lot of it is I'm upgrading versions of software. There's relatively fewer percentage of our time that's spent on doing new systems, and I think that from an end user perspective, that's really where the value of IT is doing new stuff. So we want to see if there's a way that we can try to shift so that we get more bandwidth opened up in terms of our work hours to do more new projects. And then the benchmark of the projects in green status. So that is another area that has been highlighted as something that we need to improve on. I've looked at some of the numbers and I would agree that I think our duration to deliver is longer than the actual effort to get the projects out the door. So I've got a few ideas about maybe how we can change the way that we do our application support and development that hopefully will have positive impact on that. So those are some of the top 5 KPIs, and of course it goes away. My second disclaimer is I'm more of a technologist than a finance person. So we have 5 of these department funds where the money comes into IT. I think that finance could probably maybe speak to the nature of this. My experience with my time at the state is that there's different fund sources. Sometimes there's different restrictions on those funds, and so that's why we have a multitude of funds that support the overall work of IT. But I think it's more of an accounting thing than an actual IT necessity. So again, this is from a kind of a narrow IT perspective about the key projects. So COVID was the start of this to support remote work. We continue to maintain the VPNs and continue to maintain our web presence with Office 365. We've undertaken workstation upgrades and replacements, so some of the laptops and desktops are gonna go along in the tooth. Their performance was slow. So we've been upgrading hardware. I think we're about 80% complete with that so that people can have a more performant workstation and improve their productivity. Conference room AV upgrades, this ties into the remote work. I think there were some ARPA funds that were given for this to do the conference room upgrades to enable kind of that hybrid work environment that people seem to enjoy. Columbus infrastructure improvements, so we've got a fairly large project that we're in the final-ish stages of to upgrade the police radios and the 911 center software. And the phone system replacement, so that is now complete. I think that was a multi-year effort to get the back end and some of the infrastructure to support the voice over IP phones.
Can I stop you there?
Yes.
Clemmis, we serve 50-ish police departments with their radios.
Yes.
Are they fully paid for, including, indirect costs?
I would say no. So yeah, there's so part of this upgrade is we're moving the radios to the state system, so the MPSCS. So we're getting off of kind of that Oakland County antenna infrastructure into something that's more of a shared system with the state. It'll allow, I think, better compatibility as they, so police can talk to one another for states of emergency. Very recently, as we get requests for different counties to come onto Clemmis, we have changed the way that we kind of calculate the total cost. So there were 3 counties, kind of Traverse City-ish area, I think Sheboygan, there was a couple others that were doing an RFP. We gave them what would be, I think, a more accurate representation of onboarding costs and sustainable costs. And then we haven't heard back officially, but they've, I don't think we've made the final cut. So I would say that, and again, I'm not authoritative on this, but I think that there's probably not a full break even on that, on the Clemmis.
I can add just a little bit.
Okay.
I'm Sean Phelps from Fiscal Services.
Hi, Sean.
There are definitely different rates for internal Oakland County agencies compared to outside of Oakland County. They pay a lot more than what our agencies do.
Okay, but we're still kind of underwater with our Oakland County agencies. They're not fully covering all the costs.
Not completely, but it's our way of kind of helping out probably, as in the past. So I'm not quite sure what the entire history is behind it, but
Me neither, which is
Jim
why
Manning
I
might
kind
be
of
able to
poke at it
get a
as,
little bit more there.
to me, it just seems like a kind of a black hole of, I agree, we should be supporting the locals, and I like the idea that we're going with more of a state situation, but I think we should get paid for what we do, all the costs of it. I do. There's no reason we should be subsidizing our locals. They have taxes too. Commissioner Cavell?
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask that because to my understanding, we're using 18% more of the fund balance to further subsidize Clemmis. This upcoming year, we're planning to spend $4.5 million. So I was gonna ask about that too, because it is not a even funding, and it sounds like it's way uneven. And I get what you're saying, Sean, about, we're, mutual aid, we're helping each other out. But we don't do that like that with a lot of other things.
Right.
So, I agree, let's fix
It
that.
has a long history, is what I'll say.
Yeah,
I would like to see it year over year get more equitable with what we're being paid versus what we have to pay to have your department do the work.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there's always an upper bound to, shared services, so.
Yep. Okay,
Yeah, and so the Department Reorganization, so I was here just a few weeks ago, we talked about that, the elimination of some of the positions, the creations of the new ones, so we're getting ready to ask for HR's assistance to post those and see if we can get those filled. So that's moving forward. So the major funding shifts and adjustments, so this is basically, again, from kind of a narrow IT perspective, software license increases from some of our large software vendors, so Microsoft, Workday, Okta, Adobe. And then we've got some maintenance increases for vendor support. This is more specifically in the network area, so we've been rolling out some newer network technologies that's a little more complex. We've had some incompatibilities, and so we've had to rely a little bit more on vendor support to try to get that completed and get it stabilized. Our new investments, So continued investment in the infrastructure, security and identity and access management. We've, cybersecurity's got a project for something called PAM, so it's privileged account management. So it's a way to try to reduce and then keep track of people that have kind of the super access to the systems. And this is more of an insurance against, internal threat kind of stuff. And also, access gets compromised externally, it's another layer of defense against that. Server replacement, so we've got this IT infrastructure modernization project, so we're bringing in some, a little more state-of-the-art disk storage, more virtualization, newer servers, so that we can have better performance and better stability in our infrastructure. We also have this $2.5 million funding that's been allocated for software for departments. So I think one of the structural challenges of IT that I've seen in the few months that I've been here is that we do a pretty thorough job of taking, the block of hours that we have to do IT work and allocating that out over a couple of year span. Which is good for, I guess, making sure we're getting full utilization of the resources. But the counterbalance to that is that, the departments sometimes have good ideas and we have trouble accommodating them because our slate is full. So this $2.5 million funding, I think, will help us to be a little more responsive to that, so we can contract out some of this work if necessary. And then I have some ideas moving forward about how maybe we can get a little more flexibility to increase our agility to take on some of these emergent work from the departments. Because again, I think that the new stuff tends to create more value than keeping the lights on, although we can't not keep the lights on, right? So I guess philosophically for me, and I don't want to get too much on a rant about IT, but the whole leadership of IT is trying to maintain a dynamic balance across all these forces, right? So we've got, the vendor costs are increasing. There's never enough supply to meet the demand of the end user community. We've got our own kind of things to deal with in terms of maintaining a current infrastructure, and you've got to try to keep all that in balance. And sometimes I make mistakes, so it won't always be perfect, but that's kind of where I'm trying to aim. 24 initiatives, so Windows 11 is out. We're gonna see about getting the Windows 10 upgraded to Windows 11 on the desktops and laptops. Our IT infrastructure modernization was, I kind of touched on this before, so that's more of a storage and compute program. The P25 radio project is the Clemis moving to the state system, so we're in the throes of that as we speak. Some security improvements. So we're looking at a new, replacing our antivirus with something that's a little more state of the art. We're also looking at doing an internal external pen test with a third party just to identify where there might be vulnerabilities that we're not aware of. So we've got those in the near term. Anticipated projects, so we always have new requests that come in from the department that we will do our best to accommodate. I'm told that Fiscal has got a rate study that's in the cards for us. I also have started a third-party IT cost benchmark, so we're probably about halfway through. They've been gathering the data. They've got a database of other IT organizations that are about our size, some of them government, some of them not. And I'd like to get an idea about where our total spend is and kind of the percent of it to see, if we're kind of in the ballpark of where we should be. And then the IT service management, our help desk system is a little old and it's difficult to use. And so I'd like to see if we could get that replaced. I think we get kind of a double benefit from that, so it will help us to, I guess, be a little more efficient and effective in terms of responding to the requests from the users, and it'll also be a little easier for people to do self-service. So we'll have hopefully a knowledge management piece of this, and people won't always have to call to request help. So we've got that on tap. Major contracts, I guess, like I said, the antivirus and security monitoring, we've got that coming up, and telecom expense management, I think I was here maybe a month before last and we talked about that we were doing a renewal, but I'd like to see if we could get that rebid as part of my quest to maybe not just renew as much as we move forward. So those are my slides. And
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's.
I heard a question, or it seemed like something. And so that look in your eye, like I got a question.
Yeah.
But I'm not the chair, so I won't recognize you.
Right, yeah, I know,
Okay, well, click your button. There's
Call.
Okay, we'll start with Commissioner Rahman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the presentation. IT obviously does a lot of good work and it's hard to kind of digest all of it. I think for me, as I'm looking through this budget, it's even more confusing only because there's so many different buckets, right, of what's coming in, what's going out, trying to wrap my head around all of it is pretty tough. And especially as a
I
new,
feel your pain.
as a new commissioner, last week we were kind of looking through and doing a little bit of a deeper dive specifically at kind of how the charges work and things like that. Something that came across, that sent some pink flags up for me is, like an $800 laptop or tablet that I'm issued. Ultimately, the cost, not to me individually, but maybe to the department, is multiple X of that $800 tablet, right, or whatever the case is. So given that, I'm curious what steps are in place right now to kind of reevaluate that internal rate, if you will, the rate structure, to ensure that that cost is representative of maybe more of a true market value, knowing that we have to pay a little bit of a premium for your services, your time, your experience, all of that, but to keep it at least reasonable.
Yeah, so I'll give you a two-part answer. So one of them I'll try to answer the question, the other one I'll just give you my thoughts. So the answer to your question is, it goes back to the rate study that finance wants to do. So there's and I've seen this, before with these chargeback mechanisms, and I don't want to blend it. So the rate study will help to say the laptop's not $800, it will be something less. The reason that the laptop's $800 is that we need a way to try to take the bucket of all of the IT costs and kind of spread it around the departments and get it back, right? So that the whole chargeback thing to keep IT solvent. The laptop is something that many people have. So you get network charges and stuff that are lumped into the laptop. So it's not just the laptop, there's other IT overheads that are rolled into it. And I think that they picked that because it's kind of a common thing. The rate study, I think, will make it more accurate to say, okay, well, the laptop is less, but now there'll be charges for the phone. There might be, a wireless charge. So that, I think, is kind of the official answer to that. Now, this is sort of my personal opinion, and, finance may be mad at me for saying this, but I feel like, so I'm gonna do this third-party cost study for IT, and we'll get an answer back from them, and it'll either be, hey, the costs for your IT department are on par, or they're not, and they're gonna be able to say, you're heavy here, you're light here, whatever. But let's assume that we're kind of middle of the bell curve on that. Having these charges back to the departments puts us in a bad situation because people psychologically and emotionally feel like it's like we're taking their money. But we're not really taking their money, and so other departments also, HR, and I'm assuming these other things have some, it takes money to run a department. And we end up having these, I'll call them dysfunctional conversations about, well, what if I give you back 3 laptops? Can you give me $2,400? And I can't.
Yeah, it's not my job, yeah.
Well, and even if I could, I can't because there's distortion in the number. And so selfishly, from an IT perspective, it would be great if I could just take the lump of money and say, if we could figure out a way to fairly distribute this so that it's not tied into these discrete things. And then we could maybe move the conversation to, well, how can IT maybe be more helpful to you to try to at its best, right, IT is a force multiplier, right, it's an amplifier. Well, I'd rather not spend so much time with people, and it's on both sides, right? We send the bill, and then people look at the bill, and then I get feedback about, well, there's errors in the bill, which there are errors in the bill. So then I've got to have our budget folks say, oh, oops, we typed the thing in the wrong line, or we triple charged you for this. It's just a lot of cruftiness. Now, I get it because, there's chargeback mechanisms and there's probably laws. I'm assuming there's laws, there's things. I'm trying to build a bridge back to finance. There's probably reasons, good reasons why we're doing this. And like I said, with the 5 funds, I'm sure there's reasons for all that. But I'm with you because as I'm looking at our, multi-page, budget deck, it's difficult for me to follow, honestly, as well. There's a lot of ins and outs, and a lot of this I feel is I don't want to say it's abstract, but I mean, it's not actual hard dollars, right? So, but I guess to go back to your point, it's really not $800 for the tablet. It's $800 for the tablet because we have to have a way to get all of the infrastructure kind of surrounding that, the storage and the compute and all that ends up getting wrapped into the thing.
So are we hoping once this rate study's done and all the dust is settled, there's gonna be a cleaner way to report this? Is that ultimately where we're heading, or? Because I appreciate what you're saying, but at the end of the day, it won't help me even next year when we're sitting here and I'm still gonna be a deer in the headlights trying to digest IT.
Yeah, so some of the complexity, I agree with you, probably won't go away just because of the nature of it, right? I mean, and the way that the way that we're billing in the 50-minute increments and everything, it's almost like IT's a law firm. And that also discourages, constructive engagement, right? Because if someone says, hey, I have a question, well, okay, technically I need to get a ticket and all that. And there's reasons for all this, right? I mean, it's developed over time, but if we think about, reinventing and transforming IT, I think that this is some things that we could consider as trying to streamline some of this. So the rate study should make the distribution of the costs more representative of the actual costs, but in a way it'll make the problem worse, I think, because now there'll be more things that get charged. So unless we go to some sort of a model, and this is where I'm completely out of my depth because I'm a technology guy, but if we say, all right, number of people per department, or we come up with some sort of a index of IT intensity or something, some way to take the bucket of money that it takes to run IT and fairly distribute that across the departments. I think that would be easier, right? But the fact remains, we've got a lot of projects. We've got a lot of contractors, we've got a lot of external suppliers, we've got software, hardware. So just the nature of it, there's a lot of moving pieces to IT, and we're gonna be stuck with that, I think. But trying to kind of grok the puts and the takes, that's, I think it could be cleaner, but it might not be simpler.
Okay, next up, Commissioner Powell.
Oh, I withdraw.
What'd you say?
I withdraw.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Cavell.
Thanks. I like what you're saying, right? Because I've wondered that as well about, right, if HR billed the same way IT does, then like every department would have however much more money. But then it would just feel nonsensical and kind of asinine, but you're the ones that do it. So a lot of us get frustrated with your department because it's confusing, but then also it does feel like like you're taking, or that it's a good way to hide money. Not that you're doing anything nefarious, but it's like, what is the true cost of your department? So I appreciate you lifting that up. Is there, and forgive my ignorance, because again, understanding how the money flows, for finance, or for facilities, right, they have a CIP, right, a capital improvement plan and a fund for that. We put X amount of dollars in it, so then we know, okay, this is coming from that fund, and it's been planned out, so it's very procedural. So, I mean, I think we would let them get away with spending all sorts of crazy money as long as it was not a budget amendment that added to, because we'd be like, oh yeah, we already talked about this. I mean, do you do that? Because it doesn't feel like it, and then we get super pissed. And if you just had like more truth in how much computer stuff costs, like a CIP for IT, do you have that?
So between these 5 funds, I suppose we have buckets of money where IT gets the money, right? But like in terms of what does IT cost, we've got the total bill. So it's basically it's staff hours, it's your hardware, software, and then these contractors, and then some cloud services, right? So we've got professional services, the contract services. Professional services is people mostly in major projects, and then the contract services is more Workday, Office 365, and cloud stuff. So we've got big buckets that, and a lot of this we get invoices for, or we track it very granularly. So I've got a number, and that's really this third-party cost benchmark that I'm doing with Infotech. We're giving them all of this, and they're trying to map it and compare it to other organizations. Because I don't, it seems rightish to me, but I would like some external validation to say, yeah, the spend seems good. But the project, so the project work, I think, is where we get variability because, and I don't want to make excuses for IT, but the projects can be complex, and we have, because of unforeseen incompatibilities at all the different layers of the stack, there's problems that need to be worked out. And so sometimes you need experts to come in and say, well, this thing should be working, but it's not. And so there's some unpredictability there. But in general, I think you're right. I mean, we could say, here's what IT costs, and we're gonna do, like to keep the lights on money, and then we can bill back for projects maybe. I mean, there's different ways that we could think about trying to work this. But at the end of the day, if the costs come back that they're reasonable, and I want to be fiscally responsible. I don't want to say, okay, well, you can always do better with the cost, but it sort of costs what it costs to have a department. And however we want to recover those costs, I guess we need to figure out like how to do that and stay within the law. But there's a lot of, to me, it seems like there's a lot of complexity to how that happens. And again, there probably are very good reasons why we have to track the funds separately and there's restrictions on the money and all that. But this is where I'm out of my depth a little bit because again, I'm more of a technology guy than a finance guy. But I think we share the pain of this, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to explain it and it's, again, I've got a huge packet of stuff and I've sat with the staff and got some notes, but it's very complex.
Understood, okay, well, thank you for that. You mentioned something that made me go, huh, cause you said you prefer to rebid stuff versus renew it.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of pontificate on that for us?
Yeah.
So there are, well, I'll start with the reasons why we renew, right? So there are, I don't know, a couple dozen maybe software and hardware products that we have that we probably are going to keep in the long term. So like Microsoft is always a good example for this because they have a lot of market presence and the alternatives to it aren't great. We could go with the Google Suite, the G Suite, we could go with like a LibreOffice, open source thing. The challenge with those is, so the open office stuff is free, but there's huge retraining for the end user. There's always compatibilities with the documents, formats, and so you get a lot of operational drag trying to do something like that. The G Suite, I think, is more competitive, but if you are working with other external entities, you're still gonna get some compatibility stuff. So we've got Microsoft. The Office 365 in the cloud, I think, is good. People can access it remotely. It's web-based, right? We get the terabyte of storage with OneDrive. So there's things to like about it. But Microsoft, like any large company, sort of capitalizes on the market dominance, right? And I think that this would be true of any cloud provider. If we, went heavy into Amazon, there's a lot of lock-in. So, I guess getting back to this dynamic balance thing with IT, some of the stuff I feel like we don't have a whole lot of choice. The stuff where we do, I try to kind of keep a balance between on-prem and in the cloud. I would prefer to get the stuff into the cloud that makes sense, but I always want an escape hatch to say, well, if all of a sudden someone wants to crank up the rates, we at least need to be able to have a credible threat back to say, well, I'll just pull it back on-prem. So there's, it's a bit of a juggling and kind of a judgment call to say how much of what, of that do we need to do, but at the end of the day, there's no great answer. So for some of these that we, if you look down the road and say, well, 10 years from now, we'll probably have Microsoft, there's a cost to creating the RFP, opportunity cost with that. There's potentially the cost increase because, you're gonna put it back out in the market and the vendors will raise rates over time and so it's gonna come back. So that's kind of the case to say, well, let's not do them. But the case for doing it though is that we could uncover competitors in the space. So I'm not watching every space of IT like a hawk. I will know if there's a Microsoft competitor, but if it's something like more of a niche product where maybe there's a startup that's doing a great job and we would benefit cheaper, better service or whatever, it would help to uncover that. So it's just, again, it's a balance of the organization to say, okay, we're gonna put together an RFP, we have to figure out what the scoring criteria is, it takes a while. And if the staff is working on that, they're not working on projects. So, I've started to go down a path of, is there a way we can do kind of more of a skinny RFP? I still wanna have competitive bidding and I don't wanna end up in an orange jumpsuit, but is there a way that we could kind of say, okay, let's narrow the products down to like the top 5 or whatever, we could get that from one of our, other sources, or maybe we could look at other counties, and then with this kind of skinny version, it would help us to do it quicker, and we would, it would be less burdensome for us to do the bidding. So I would like to do more bidding if I could manage to kind of get this worked out with IT and purchasing and everybody else to make sure that it's goal setting, but yeah.
Okay. I noticed just 2 more questions, if you don't mind.
Okay.
In your, from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 26, your budget was $7 million, right? Am I reading that right? So, which I understand is, 1% change from 25 to 26, 4% from 24 to 25. But one, I say that because earlier today, we spent an hour arguing over 700K.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we all noticed that you're looking for 7 million more. But also, what's all that going towards? I know some of it will
Contracted
probably-
services, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about. So what do you contract for?
So the contracted services, that's mostly the software as a service piece and the cloud stuff. So it's the Workday, it's the Microsoft Office. There's I think Qualtrics is in there for like $500,000. I think that was ARPA and it was coming back into IT. So that the contracted services is mostly like the outward facing stuff. I mean, we could probably, I don't know the details around what is fully driving that. I mean, it's probably a lot of small things that come up. But I hear what you're saying about the $700K versus the $7 million. And I guess it's, I don't know, I don't wanna say it's the nature of IT, but IT is costly across the board, right? Salaries are high, consultants are expensive. Although the hardware, you know, with Moore's Law, right, you get more bang for the buck, but it's not necessarily cheaper because, you know, you're still paying a lot, but you get more for it. And, you know, is it fair? Probably not, but I think it's unfair in the same way that a lot of stuff is unfair, you know, I mean, I don't know.
It is what it is, yeah.
Kind of, and you know, because IT to me is, a lot of it is dynamic balance plus optimization problem, right? So if we say, hey, I really wanna drive the cost down, well, there's strategies you can use to drive the cost down, but then it's gonna be at what other cost? So it's either gonna be, it's harder to use, it's less secure, we've got training issues, you know, maybe we will have more smaller products, and so then you get higher support. From my perspective, there's really no silver bullet to IT. It's just, you know, how can you make it less bad, and where do you want the good to be? There are companies that, and I don't know about government so much, but you know, you could say, all right, I'm a marketing firm, and so I want IT to do like digital brand stuff. Okay, well, you can tune an IT organization to do that. What's difficult, and I think it's a special challenge of government IT is, you know, we've got to be Walmart and Neiman Marcus at the same time. There are people that say, hey, I want IT to be, you know, commodity products that are as cheap as I can because I want to take money and do other stuff with it, which is valid. There are other organizations that say, hey, you know, my stuff is unique, and so I want a lot of custom, and I want a lot of consulting, and I want you guys to help us to figure stuff out. And, you know, typically that would be two different consulting companies, right? But instead we're under a single umbrella where IT is doing our best to try to serve the different needs of all the different departments. And, you know, I guess like any organization that tries to be everything to everyone, sometimes we fall short on all marks.
Okay. My last question was about some professional services. You have a lot of them. But there was one. Well, there's two quick questions, which one was about Flock. So this is in there, it's for like $10 or something.
Okay.
So I just don't know what that's about.
Flock?
Yeah, because it's a license plate camera technology. And actually in Ferndale, we just had a big contentious thing about this because do we wanna have at the entrance, we bought a bunch of cameras, so on 8 Mile, you can take pictures of everyone's license plate and then track people with their license plate. And so I don't know why you spent $10, or you know, your predecessor spent $10 on a license plate camera system that Ferndale paid like $2 million for, so I don't know what that is. And then the other one is
I don't know, I see it on the thing, Flock license plate cameras.
Yeah, and then same sort of thing with like Pure Storage, it's a $1 contract.
Yeah, so Pure Storage, that for sure is not gonna be $1. So Pure, that must be a placeholder. So the Pure Storage is kind of our next version of the storage in the data center. So it's like solid state disk stuff, flash drives. So it's, so that's part of the IT infrastructure modernization.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know why that's $1. It's probably gonna be millions.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna ask too then, if Windstream Holdings, they have some contracts, but those did not change, but they've had them for years.
Yeah, Windstream has a strange story. So I think they actually went out of business and were bought by another company. So they do our fiber optic network maintenance stuff. And we also use them for one of our data centers, Colo Data Center. So that's a long, complex thing with Windstream.
So this is accurate then that we had a contract from like 2012 to 2023 and we didn't give them any more money.
I think the reason is that they have a different name, I don't remember what it is. It's Windstream and now it's something else. But yeah, that would make sense because they're the fiber, one of the fiber providers along with AT&T.
Okay. How do we get the right info for these professional services? Who does these?
I'm sure IT does them, I mean, so
Are they in
I,
here though, like divided up more better? Are they in this book? Divided
they're
up?
only in the
Or
big one.
explanation, okay.
Well, cause we touched
I think
yesterday
it's-
that
Get a
purchasing,
more,
right?
you know?
So I think it's probably a combination of, purchasing and the department.
This book.
As you can see, there's several contracts and somehow IT would have several
Yeah.
contracts.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like
I
with
think if you wanted to, if you wanted like more specific detail or like,
I don't want more specific, I just want the accurate detail. I mean, a $1 placeholder for a contract that apparently is super pivotal to the
Right.
county not blowing up, like.
right, and
the hell?
it may be, I guess I don't know the backstory of that one line, it
Sure.
probably is in there in some other line, right? But, yeah, cause I can't imagine that we would have missed the pure storage thing in the budget, but I guess to the point of, the professional services thing, I think at some point in the past, they did an RFP for IT contractors, and I think it was awarded to many. I think we've got about 60 contractors that are here, but I think we've got a lot of companies that can provide folks with different skill sets at different rate cards. And so I think that's why there's so much professional services is, hey, if we need a business analyst, we would go out to the pre-qualified vendors, they would send the stuff in and we would pick one. So we might have one from the company, but they're on the list because they're a potential provider. So I think that adds some magnitude that maybe isn't necessarily there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you good? Commissioner Smith Charles is next, followed by Commissioner Powell.
Great. I can say that Commissioner Cavell took care of a few of my questions.
Thanks, Jill.
So I'm sure someone might ask about whether or not the IT fund 63,600 is structurally balanced. So I'll lay that up for someone to respond to at some point. If you know now, that'd be cool. But it says the planned use of the fund balance to equal approximately 42 million over the next 3 years. Is there enough in that fund balance to cover this growing shortfall? And while you're thinking on that, my other personal perspective question is, I hear IT a lot here. I'm curious, do you do anything that would qualify as IS?
Yes.
Information systems. So I look at them differently, and I'm just curious, do we have an IS person versus an IT person?
Well, so our applications team has people that support information systems, right? We have database analysts and administrators that do that sort of thing. I think actually a lot of the work that IT does is really around information systems and processing, right? I guess, and this goes back to my trying to find a perspective for the presentation. So a lot of the stuff I talk about is more, speeds and feeds. But from an end user perspective, I think they experience IT through applications.
Great. And are you coordinating with, for example, Patty over here? Because it sounds like there's been so much information coming to us over the last couple of days. But if I remember correctly, the board will have a way to make sure that our resolutions that we voted on and our minutes and things like that are on the web relatively quickly, maybe 3 weeks past the time that we voted on it. Is that coordinated with you all? Do you have someone who writes code here, or it's outsourced?
So we do have application developers that are, on our staff. We also have, providers that host things in the web. I think the external website's hosted by a third party. Part of our what I call the reorg with our business relationship managers, the board, I think, so Tammy Shepard is now the BRM for the board, and I think she has recently met with Patty to talk about what, specific needs does the board have, and then how we can kind of get that in our pipeline. So if there's things where there's too much delay, or we can improve the process, totally open to that. I mean, part of what we're trying to do with this kind of IT transformation thing is to I guess narrow the gap between the end user expectation and what we're delivering. Now, that may be at the cost of something else, right? But I'm hoping to kind of take some of the IT for IT part where I can maybe more actively manage that and try to redirect resources to be more outwardly facing.
Gotcha. Last question. We just had an election yesterday. Obviously, people were looking at the web, and it redirects you to an external site. who's that site and who's responsible for it?
So that's a good question. I don't exactly know. I was, so we had a team of IT folks that were in Teams chat last night and we were watching the election just to make sure everything was going okay. And, I saw that I think Berkeley Precinct 5 seemed like it was the last one in. But I also noticed that, yes, it seems like there's even a third website. So I've got a request into one of my folks to give me some whiteboard chalk talker on what the flow of that is, because I don't know.
Yeah,
I was
keep
curious.
keep us posted
Yeah.
on that. I'm
Says
just curious who's
redirecting a lot of
controlling the data.
Yeah, there was
Commission.
some loose talk in the channel about, things and it was like, oh, I think the city IT department is working on that and the connection to us, I think there's multiple paths and then how it, who routes it and how it gets there, I don't know. But
Yeah, so definitely put in your notes, because I know you just said something, Commissioner Long, about even just simple board BOC act, the page for the BOC is a redirect.
Yes.
How long will that be before we're actually in the regular URL thread? And I don't need that answer today.
Yeah, and I guess I would like to figure out like why is that? The URLs are quick, right? I mean, we can change URL in a minute or two, but I would need the backstory about what's the architecture, why is it, what's the story behind the story? So since I'm,
Did that before too.
I've told some of my folks that I feel like we're at the most dangerous time because I've been here about 3 months and I'm like a teenager that thinks he has all the answers now. And I'm like, what we need to do is this. But there's reasons why things are the way they are. And so I want to kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, before I go do this thing that I think is good, I don't want to accidentally break 6 other things. So, but I guess I think it would be easy to fix as long as there's not a reason why it's weird.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we're running a little bit over, but Commissioner Powell had a question.
We okay.
Okay, anybody else have questions?
I think that's
for Mr. Davenport?
It wasn't necessary.
I really appreciate your emperor has no clothes approach to this, really, because that's how I felt when I came here a few years back, was like, this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, how this all flows and how you figure out how much money we're spending and so on. I wasn't crazy and.
Or the two of us are crazy together.
Or the two of us are crazy together, but I appreciate that, you're willing to kind of take this on and really sort out what makes sense. And if it takes you a few months to get there, I'm good with that. 3 months, you're right, it's just enough to know where to park and who the boss is and all that stuff,
Right.
but you really don't know a whole lot about all the details yet. That's a good place to be, so.
Yeah, as long as I don't steer the ship into a rock, it'll be good, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think your position is intended to be a fresh set of eyes, and I'm glad to see that that's how you're operating and that, the people in your department are awesome. We've all had lots of support from IT over the years, in lots of different ways. But I think it's kind of universally, I don't think I'm speaking out of school to say we all kind of think it's a little hard to follow and more cumbersome than it needs to be. So I'm glad that you're jumping on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, IT's hard to follow by its nature. The cumbersomeness, I think we could maybe do better with. And I agree with you. I think, so far the folks are well intentioned. I think that sometimes, some of the processes overburden them, but I think we can make the turn.
Okay, well, if that's.
One quick question, we were just
Commissioner
chatting, so I appreciate your expertise in the IT world and everything technical. Is there someone who actually does the number side of things within this department? Or
Yes.
do we leave entirely and go to the executive?
So I've got at least 2 people in the department that work the budget stuff. And then we also interface with the fiscal quite a bit.
And are
so.
those folks here, or are they?
I did not bring them, but they're here, but I didn't bring them.
Cause it would just make sense to me at budget hearings to have the number of people here rather than the IT guy. And again, no offense, I don't mean it, I'm sure it's not gonna come off the right way.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying.
I know we have
I'm just kidding.
we have a lot of questions about the numbers, it doesn't make any
There's more
sense
than
to us.
numbers,
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm more confused after listening to you for 40 minutes than I was when we started this whole presentation.
No offense.
And
Yeah.
again, I don't mean that as any disrespect to you, it's just the truth of the matter.
For sure, yeah, I'm the first to admit I'm not a finance, but I mean, I'd be happy to, we could set up I don't know how this works, if we're allowed to set up offline meetings or whatever, but I'd be happy to bring the budget folks and we can try to go deep dive into some of the numbers. We can drag finance into it.
Well, I'm wondering if maybe, we have a separate discussion of this in a finance committee meeting in a month or two. You know, after we're through the budget process and all that stuff, but you have so much going that you're trying to make happen, that we would like to understand and be part of. I think the finance committee is a good place to review that, or economic development, either one. Just to come and make a presentation of where you're at, but let's give you enough time to figure that out a little bit. Can we do that?
Yeah, sure.
Make a note? Okay,
Make a note and we'll make it available either just before the budget's approved or following the budget, certainly.
okay,
Yeah,
all
sounds good.
right, great,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.
All right, does anybody need a 2-minute break before we jump into the sheriff's department?
2 minutes, okay.
Yeah, then they can go,
And then
they can
we'll-
go get cozy up there for 2 minutes. The hot seat.
first one. Okay, everybody, we're back.
First, oh, there's a
It's long.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Especially the first year, because that's a first year transition.
Our next budget review is the sheriff's department.
12 miles.
Oh, the Black
And
Sea.
we have pretty much our full complement. I'm gonna step up and get my drink in a minute, but
So whatever you use
we'll
for your
get
county
started, so
credentials
we're
is the same one
respectful
on
of
the
time.
I'll come after the meeting.
iPad. Okay, yep.
Sorry.
From
Talk about
both sides, you
I
can hear
know.
what's going on in here. Okay,
Good job. Not me. It's the first time, you
This job interesting, so. Oh, there you go, yeah.
I got a lot of community issues.
all right. I think we're ready. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair, members, appreciate the time to chat with you. If I have a McConnell moment, it's because I'm in hour 46 of a fast, so if I
Oh.
quickly throw me a donut.
We have health food. You're welcome to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I try not to eat for a while. I do fasting periodically. So, we'll answer a lot of questions. I'll try to be brief, but in terms of the overall, just a quick look, there's 3 new general fund positions, which are actually to replace 3 positions that are currently funded under a body worn camera grant. So obviously, we want that program to continue. The remaining position changes are budget neutral, so that's kind of where we are on that. We do have some specific things, if you want to get into the Marine Patrol budget, we have about $100,000 left from a additional Marine Patrol assignment in FY '22. And we'd like to kind of break it up and allot it to the 2 forthcoming years to continue to enhance that kind of patrol.
Is this the patrol, the extra patrols that we started last year on the
Yes.
5 extra lakes?
Yes.
So, okay, so the funding covered it for this year, or it was more than enough and we wanna spread it out?
Right.
Well, you split it, so it was actually board dollars, and so you covered 22, and then in 23, we got a grant, so we didn't need any of the board funding, so you still have $100,000 left, and so what we were asking is if you could take the board dollars and then allocate it 50,000 for 24 and 50,000, and 50,000 for 25. If it's in the budget this early, or if it gets into the adopted budget, then we can start planning early. If you recall in 22, I think it didn't get adopted until like April or May. Well, we're right into, we're into the boating season, and so we can't hire and train at that point, so that's
Yeah,
what
so
we're
it's not
asking.
gonna ask for more money, it's just how we allocate
Yeah.
what you've already set aside.
Okay.
Maybe.
I guess to skip to our top 3 goals, still building a state-of-the-art training center and dispatch center. We've been working with a lot of folks and consultants on that. Obviously, the cost of this is gonna go up dramatically given what's happened with inflation and materials and everything else. I think we're gonna get a bit of sticker shock and we might have to kind of reposition what's critical and what's desired. But the actual physical training center and dispatch center, we believe are critical. What's in them ultimately, we'll have to figure out based on price points. But, we've never had a dedicated, purposely built training center in this county. And for me, the best way to have better police outcomes is better hiring and better training. And we do an amazing job, our team does an amazing job, but when you're using basically an abandoned middle school and saying, okay, now pretend that is a jail cell. Versus, what we envision in the training center is an actual mock-up based on our facilities. So corrections can train in there, and an actual mock-up of a courtroom so our court deputies could train for an emergency in a similar scaled room and react and if something horrific happened. Because, obviously in our business, as I said this a lot, hope and prayer is part of what we do, but that's not a strategy, preparation is. So training allows us to be prepared for things that we might face. We hope and pray it never happens, but we have to be ready in case it does. And obviously, we were touched by such a tragedy right here in Oakland County not that long ago that still affects us all to this day. So training center still at the top of our list. Taser replacement, we've been talking to different folks about that. And one of it may deal with language on how long you can lease versus some of the programs that's available from vendors. And I think we have a 3-year cap on lease programmatically from the county, some language like that. But anyways, we're trying to work through how do we get the newest tasers because they give a lot more distance, flexibility, and capability for less than lethal situations that we think are important for us to have to stand back at a farther distance, to give people a chance to kind of work through that crisis before they have to get into that dangerous situation. And these allow both farther distance stand back, but also multiple capacity. It's a much improved version. So if we did.
You're planning to fund those out of general fund this year?
We did put in a request for all the different funding things. We didn't get any. We included it in our request to the county executive. That wasn't included. So we're trying to work through a process that ultimately will obviously be in close communication with all of you on maybe how we move forward with this because we think it's real important. A lot of our tasers are end of life and they're not being serviced or warranted obviously at this point.
Okay.
Ongoing staffing and recruiting. We have, I think at this point, somewhere around 26, 28 positions that are open and critical positions, but that doesn't take into account that a lot of the people we have hired still aren't their own operationally yet. So for example, we have 18 deputies still in FTO. So while we have those positions filled, they're not out on their own doing the job. We have 12 still in corrections training. We have 10 dispatchers still in training. So if you add that up, obviously that's 40 that are hired, but they're not operational on a standalone. So that still requires other people with them or other positions to be covered on overtime. So work in progress. We appreciate the board's support in trying to get more people in the door. Our HR has done an amazing job to bring a lot of people in because it's been a challenge on lots of levels because the analogy that I use is that if you own a restaurant and you can't fill your positions or you have vacancies, you can close a section and hurt your bottom line, and slows your service, but you can do that. Well, we can't do that. We can't say part of the city's closed tonight or part of the jail, take care of yourself. It's gotta be on overtime. And the challenge with that is that until we're fully staffed, every time we have a vacancy, we have to overtime it. And we overtime so much that now people are tired of the overtime, so we have to force them. And the more they get forced, the more they burn out, and then some of them quit because of that, and that exacerbates the problem. So it's been a tug pull, but with your help and with our HR recruitment efforts, we're seeing the light, and we're not quite close to it yet, but we're seeing it.
We had a long discussion with HR yesterday on the subject of how hard or easy it is to get through the HR system into the departments that are looking for folks, so.
And that's a key component for us because a lot of agencies have a conditional offer right out of the box and they beat us to the punch.
Yeah.
So we've had people that, because our process has traditionally and historically taken a lot longer than other communities, that they get an offer from somebody else and they take it.
5% deal.
So we're working with HR and we have our own internal processes and we're trying to be competitive on that front.
On the flip side, you wanna make sure whoever it is you bring in, you wanna keep, right?
100%.
So it's
Well,
a balance, I can see.
The good thing is we do a more deep dive than most agencies do on backgrounds. And, the probationary period allows us to continue to monitor and make a decision. We're, not afraid to use that. Because if you're not cutting the mustard, as they say, in the first 6 months, things probably aren't gonna change much.
Right.
Okay.
Aviation and Overwatch requests have gone up dramatically, and obviously that's a challenge, and we're gonna be communicating more how we replace those end-of-life aircraft. But post parade shooting, Highland Park, Illinois, where a rooftop shooter at a parade obviously opened fire, more and more police agencies are asking for helicopter overwatch on their events to anticipate that potential threat. And so, you know, just what we have coming up, kind of a repeat of what we had last year, just in July. From July forward, we had Wixom Overwatch at a barbecue event. We have Royal Oak at the Pride Parade. The Dream Cruise runs from Ferndale all the way up. The State Fair in Novi, Arts Beats and Eats in Royal Oak. Franklin Village has a parade. Ferndale has an art fair. Royal Oak has a Barktoberfest. Ferndale has a pig and whiskey event, and Royal Oak has a spooktacular. So all of those events were covered with Overwatch. And it's not just the aviation that goes with that, it comes with our react team that if they spot something now, what do you do? So you have to be able to deal with it. So that's where our aviation unit is unique, but it also increasingly is getting requests and from local agencies to give them better coverage at large scale gatherings. So
I'll stop you there. How many helicopters do we currently have?
we have two.
We have two?
We've had two since 2000, and they're both at end of life.
Yeah. There, I saw 4 at the air show, so I was wondering who else they were. I know I saw 4 because they were like I thought
Actually,
2 of them were probably you.
maybe one was ours because
you
the
think
other
only
one
one?
has been in Texas for well over a year
Oh, okay.
for repair issues because it's got, and the other one was down for 8 weeks for repair issues. So what we're trying to do is get back to operational status where we have 2, because what happens is when one goes down for maintenance, you want to have the other one. And for a Dream Cruise, we like to have them both. So one's up, one's taking a rest, getting fuel. And then we constantly have coverage at the Dream Cruise the whole day. So that's our goal, is to get back to 2 functional aircraft. And we haven't been at that for 2 years plus.
Are there any other municipal agencies in Oakland County with a helicopter that you borrow sometimes or you're it?
Yeah, we get requests from all over the state, and if it's a life-threatening thing, we try to honor it, but it's focused on Oakland County requests, and obviously you just heard a handful of what's consistent and regular, let alone daily patrol.
Okay, Commissioner Rahman?
I was just curious, what does a helicopter cost, just to get a rough idea?
New?
Yeah.
Well, we're actually in the process of getting some updated prices. There's 2 major suppliers for police aviation, Bell and it used to be Eurocopter, but it's Airbus. So those 2 are the ones that supply the most. I would say, you know, one's more expensive than the other. Green is, I'm just throwing it, 3 million. Green means without all the accessory equipment, without the FLIR, which is forward-looking infrared, the night sun, which illuminates all of the mobile mappings and all the kinds of things that go into the helicopter to make it fully operational.
So we're saying 3.5 for the Airbus and 3.7 for the Bell.
3.5 and 3.7 so far.
And how much to outfit it thereafter?
Well, what we're trying to do is see how much of our current equipment we can move over. And at every time we get to a point where something's got to be updated or fixed, I keep asking the question, can we transfer it? Or let's not put any more money into it. So ultimately, that will be a kind of a game day, but a close to decision. What is still currently viable equipment that can be moved over? What's at end of life and it doesn't make sense? But it's usually, what was the last number that they thought outfitted versus green?
It's a long day.
It's a lot of money.
7.4, 6.3.
7.
The lion's share is the helicopter itself.
Yes.
The outfitting is just a smaller, we can do
You said
that.
another, it would be 7 million. So it's-
Oh, I missed that, I'm sorry.
7
It's quite a bit of, if you gotta completely start without using our
7.1.
existing equipment, it's a lot of money.
7 million.
But that's why we're trying to constantly keep our stuff either updated with warranty or some other kinds of, what can we keep functioning and be able to transfer to the new airships. And we're looking at, what's the options, lease versus buy. These two we bought. So it's a work in progress, but it's important. Lots of public safety levels.
So do you expect to come before us with a proposal at some point,
Yes.
or?
I just wanted to put it on your
have one, yeah,
aviation radar.
yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So we submitted a comprehensive proposal to the county exec team, basically as an informational package to say, here's the history, because obviously there's a lot of new people at the county and in administration since the aircraft were first purchased. So it gave all the historical resolutions, all of the enhancements that have been made and where we are today, and basically asking them for an assessment of a purchase versus lease option and what would work with the county. So we just wanted to open the conversation because obviously we're having issues and they're close to end of life, so.
And we must be incurring some sort of expenses on these, so is that part of the equation, or is that small?
We have an operating budget that we've built out,
For maintenance, yeah, and then the one in Texas is primarily insurance. So we're working, every time they come up with something or they open a new thing, they look, and then we have to contact the insurance company to say, hey, was this part of the insurance or not? So we're working with that, so we hit a deductible on that, and then once we met that, then everything else should be covered by insurance. But it's, it's camera, it's video, it's downlink, it's all these other systems, and so, there's a lot of back and forth working with risk management to say, okay, is this part of the insurance claim or is this not? So it's challenging.
Good.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Sure. Are you guys finished with your presentation?
He's on item 2, I think, of 3, right? Your priorities?
I'm sorry?
Weren't you on item 2
I heard
of 3 of your
Just
priorities?
the training center, taser replacement, hiring.
Yeah.
Those were the 3 priorities, right?
Cool.
And then aviation radar is something, or
What was our
not
estimate
radar,
for training
aviation replace is something you want,
Is
is under review.
He didn't say, yeah.
Okay, I understand it, I think.
And the cost
Okay,
is
do
more
you have
now.
anything else you wanna bring before us? Otherwise, I'm gonna open it up for questions.
Sure.
Okay. Let me see if anybody punched the button.
Ooh, but hurry.
I did, but I don't know.
Charlie's first, followed by Commissioner.
Charlie's got 10 questions.
Charlie got hers.
Get Charlie out
Oh, Lord, yeah, let Charlie go first.
Charlie needs last.
Family after Charlie's
Much
done.
nicer. But, so for
Yeah,
the helicopter, just to say, when you said that no helicopters were around for a couple of months, right? Because one was in Texas and one was down.
That was a
Okay.
brief period. We had one that has pretty much been handling the workload, but because of it, it burned through its regular hours and hit its maintenance cap.
Okay.
And then we got a number of requests from local communities that we couldn't provide crewed aircraft support for, but we covered it with drones. But the problem with drones is you can't react to the situation, you can only see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a huge tactical void for us.
And the helicopters, Oakland County is the only police department in Michigan with a helicopter, or there's the Michigan
No, state police has a bunch, and they disperse them, they spend, DPD, I think, actually is operating a helicopter now. They weren't for a while, they went through bankruptcy, but now I think they are. And the state police assigned one of their choppers pretty much to that area. So they basically are running 2 helicopters.
Okay.
And then the state has them around in other parts of the state.
Okay.
Which makes sense because Detroit is the largest local police agency and we're second
Gotcha.
in the whole state.
When you use the helicopter, and I guess other things, right? Because you mentioned a few of the parades and festivals. How do communities pay for that, right? You mentioned a lot of them in Ferndale. How much does Ferndale
They don't pay us because they're part of the county, so it's part of their county taxes. That's traditionally our view of it. We don't bill any community in Oakland County for any Oakland County assets.
So this goes back to our mutual aid thing we were just talking about with IT, that maybe there's some costs there that we're not recouping. And maybe that'll also create different incentives, because maybe Ferndale wouldn't ask for so much helicopter stuff, or maybe they'd ask for more if they had to figure out how much it actually costs to true up the budget.
The flip side of that is we wanna make sure we have safe
Right.
communities in these big events,
And they
so.
do.
Yeah, and smaller
It's
agencies
an
simply.
important point though, Commissioner Cavell, because we are, with all the departments, talking about freebies that are going out to the communities, and should there be a payback, you know? And I think there's a
obviously,
line.
I mean, obviously, that's a policy decision, but obviously, they're all Oakland County taxpayers.
So-
And from our point of view,
Pay,
um,
I agree.
most of the agencies in Oakland County are too tiny to have expensive equipment, and we're their fallback. We work closely with everybody, so, you know, they call us for SWAT, they call us for helicopters, they call us for, you know, Marine Division, they call us for search and rescue. It's just too cost intensive for each agency to have their own. Frankly, it doesn't make good sense for the taxpayers.
No, and especially in the case of SWAT, for example, I would prefer you guys have the SWAT equipment and the SWAT team, and my community calls you when they need you.
100%. And we do have more agencies assigning people or offering people for the SWAT team, but we still obviously eat the lion's share of these significant kinds of assets because they're best, in my opinion, delivered on a countywide share basis rather than to try to create silos. And they have their own armored tactical vehicle, and they have their own tiny helicopter, and then everybody
You
gets
talk about
priced out.
taxpayer dollars, starts to really add up, so it makes sense for you guys to have some of those big assets.
And making sure that we're not though subsidizing other places is something worth looking at.
Exactly, I think it's a good point, Commissioner Cavell.
So then, I was wondering also, so Ferndale just created a police advisory board, and I think they make recommendations. Do you do that in some sort of fashion? I know you have the special investigations unit to handle special issues, but that's all internal. Do you have like that external?
Well, the difference between, I mean, I do have a sheriff's relation team, and we make sure that we get feedback from the community, and it's a conduit for information to come to us that they may not feel comfortable to come direct to us. But the fundamental difference is there's a police department and there's a sheriff's office. So police departments are a component that are underneath someone else. They're under the mayor or the city council, and they create their own process. The sheriff's office, I'm independently elected and part of the Constitution. And so, trust me, I get a ton of feedback everywhere I go. And, you know, we engage people. We have the sheriff's relations team. I have the sheriff's advisory committee. I have a bunch of avenues for it that are there, but that's the fundamental difference. That's why we're at the sheriff's office versus the sheriff's department.
Meaning that if you.
Meaning we don't work for a mayor or city council. They come direct to us with concerns. We get emails every day. And we respond directly to that rather than have it go through a secondary process.
Right, but because you're independently elected, you could have one of those, but you're handling it, in your opinion, well enough to not need that.
Well, again, we have the sheriff's relation team, we have the sheriff's advisory, so we already have a number of mechanisms to seek and bring in more information and more feedback. And I think it's pretty robust. And on top of that, I do coffee with the sheriff all over the county, at least once a month. And I stand outside of a Kroger or a Costco for 2 to 3 hours. And there's no shyness. And I get it,
can only imagine.
I get it directly from the constituency.
Good. When it comes to training, your budget last year was something like $2.7 million, right? So what is it gonna be this year, if I'm remembering the numbers right?
Are you talking about just the training,
It's in here somewhere. I just saw it.
Yeah.
you can see what it's budgeted at, but are you talking about specific
Sorry,
line item for training or the whole unit?
The unit.
Let's see what was, what's in here and.
So emergency response and preparedness is where training is located. So our 23 budget, our current amended budget is 8 million this year. And the county exec rec for 2024 is just over 6 million.
Okay. And so 6 million, and then your budget would be, Ideally, 195 million.
I think
Yeah, that's the total recommended, the total recommended is, yeah, for
195 million. Okay.
Million or thousand?
Million.
for the whole sheriff's office.
Oh,
So that's our,
195 million.
195,028,383 is for the whole
Right.
sheriff's office for all divisions.
And that 6 million for training for this budget year, 8 million as amended last year. Does that include the $1 million grant from the community foundation for the community relations thing?
The one from Southeast
Yeah.
Michigan, that's probably in a special revenue fund, that's not in our general fund budget.
Yeah, that's not, that wouldn't fall under a training, that would fall under a programmatic grant.
Okay. Cool.
So
All
it's
right,
probably in the law enforcement grants and the other section of the budget book, not in the general fund portion.
okay, so then maybe training is maybe all in, if we could consider, okay, you're not considering that training, right, because that's community stuff, okay. All right, and then my last question was, as it relates to training, so 6 million, and then, right, we're the finance committee, and so we were kind of talking about this today. There's a lot of litigation that comes to us, well, not a lot, but we get a lot of litigation, and then we have to pay it out. Has there been an analysis of that cost benefit or the relation or interplay there? Because some of that is.
There's a huge connection there, and that's why I keep pushing training center.
Yeah.
If you look at most of the litigation, one of the first things out of the box is failure to train.
Yeah.
There were, for example, there was a wave of lawsuits across the country on improper handcuff application. And so everything, you wouldn't think of that intuitively, handcuffs. Well, that was a huge wave of litigation all across the country. So each one of those components have to be not just, thought about, but trained, and blocks of training so that it becomes routine. That when, as soon as you hook somebody up, how you put them in, how you double lock, all of that is all part of it. And that helps prevent litigation, and it also helps to mitigate litigation when it comes forth, because we can then turn around and say, this is our policy, this is our process, this was done. The fact of the matter is, we get sued all the time, lots of stuff that you're shaking your head, we got sued because the guy was being woke up because the train was going by, and he didn't like to get woke up in jail. So, anybody with $50 can sue us, but having the training records and all the things that go with it, lots of times lead to a better outcome.
So then with $6 million.
Can I
add something to that too, and because I've sat in some of these committees with finance, and I'm sure some of you know, I'm not always supportive, but sometimes we have to settle, and because it's better to settle than to take it to court. But there's some of them where, honestly, I sit there thinking we should fight it, but the recommendation, the business decision, I guess, is to settle. So some of those dollars may not have been paid had we fought it, in my opinion.
Sometimes it's more expensive to fight something even if you believe you're in the right. And so it becomes a business decision, which we hate, because it can be a self-feeding process where they see you're a mark. So we've tried as best we can to strike a balance on what gets settled and what we fight, because in a lot of these, we don't think there's any wrongdoing, but it becomes a business question.
Well, yeah, so having your training budget go down $2 million, or flatline if you do amend stuff to have it go back to $8 million over the course of the budget year, is that sufficient for that? Is that best practices by other offices of sheriffs of our size, or,
Agencies of our size across the country have training centers. Even Kent County has a training center that they built in recent history. So,
is their training budget that same percentage?
I'd have to pull their budgets, but I can tell you a lot of my colleagues in Florida have a much bigger training budget. And they have full-time training center and staffs.
And so your training budget isn't as big as those other places because you don't have the center.
And we're running very lean because it's positional. How much we can do is based on how many bodies we have. And if we add a body, then we're not within our budget constraints. So, because the majority of our budget is obviously people.
Yeah, did you ask for more training people in your budget? For the 2 FTE, 6 part-time, are any of these training, support
No.
clerk?
The support clerk
Grant
is, so we're deleting, one of the part-time non-eligible deletions is in training, and then they're asking for a full-time. They're implementing a new software system right now, and so they thought that it would require a full-time person to actually take that on and take on those duties.
Are these folks that you're asking for though, are any of them training staff?
No.
Okay. All right, thanks. Those are all my questions.
Okay, Commissioner, next up we have Commissioner Powell.
So Charlie, I can help you a little bit. So sheriff set up that's our, the sheriff relations team, the least one we have in the city of Pontiac was, he did an all-call to call out local leaders, activists, whatever. We formulated it though, but we meet with him quarterly at his office and we debrief and, stuff like that. So we meet quarterly and the commissioner runs it. Just so you know that was one that we still took the initiative to push it, even though, he requested it and we put it together and we've been moving since he became the sheriff. And it was also implemented to transition because we went from Pontiac Police to Sheriff Department. So, but the city created it. And now to also support what he just said as far as, like he don't report to a mayor or, the mayor himself then created our anti-violence. So that's probably what Ferndale kind of did. They created their own thing. And anytime we ask, which our sheriff, our Major Ewing, he serves on our anti-violence. So we have a sheriff there or he'll send someone. So they're always involved though. So that you could take that back for any of your communities and they can partner. But Sheriff's Office has always been willing to partner with us and creating and being present during them community meetings and stuff like that. They're awesome. So just to let you know with that. Now, my question for you is, for the Woodward Dream Cruise, what is the backup plan since we got the helicopter issue? And just to let you all know too, I was able to use our drones. Pontiac paid for them. The service, but we used it for our Juneteenth event and they work phenomenal. So thank you to Sheriff Bouchard, his son, he runs the department. So he did a phenomenal job. So our drone action is real good action for us. So I wanted to know what's backup plan for that. And then, what are Dream Cruise forces? Oh, and then it say the current issue is that delivering effective and innovative programming for those individuals with the mental health, substance, and issues remains a priority for the jail. So I wanted to hear where do you need help with that, for us? Cause I know we trying to get the specialists that go out with our sheriffs. I know we're trying to beef that up, get co-responders, thank you. We're trying to increase that, so I know that's one element, but I wanted to ask that question because that was one of the current issues that we're facing. So that, and then the backup plan for the Woodward Dream Cruise and anything else you want to say with me explaining your groups that you have.
So, excuse me, for the Woodward Dream Cruise, we will have one airship in operation.
Okay.
We were supposed to have both. We just got informed last night that the one that was supposed to be back here and be in service so we could alternate them is not gonna make it because they found something else wrong with it. So I already directed the division commander to come up with a schedule to have pilots standing by and additional assets that go in the aircraft so that when the chopper lands, a different crew gets in and goes right back up to keep it up in the air as much as possible throughout the cruise and to augment it with any kind of drone support as necessary. But again, drones don't give us response capability, they just give us an alert. Uh-oh, there's somebody on the roof doing whatever. So we already have a backup plan in place. It's already being worked out in terms of the schedule. Your question about mental health is still very much on our priority list. We have the 3 that are now through a grant, sergeant and 2 deputies that are, responding and tracking and doing random visits to people that have overdosed and have mental health issues. They actually did a random spot check on an individual and found he was in the active process of overdosing and dying and saved his life. So that has already borne fruit, that response team that we got through a grant. Our co-responder now has been kind of augmented and updated, so we have a crisis intervention trained deputy and the co-responder that go on patrol, and we're trying to keep them out of calls as much as possible, so they focus on mental health related calls. So we've got those two really focused efforts out in the outside world. Inside, it's still a challenge because you've got, COVID's kind of passed in lots of ways, but we were just back up to 19, like last week, I don't know where we are today, but 19 active COVID cases, and that begins to, again, affect movement and how we can do classes and how we can move people in the facility. We gotta go back to isolation and all of that. So it's been a challenge for us to do a lot of the programming that we would like to do when you still have some of those health restrictions. But again, my push on both the state and the national level is there needs to be more mental health resources, period. I mean, we would like to have more mental health responders assigned to police agencies as co-responders. We have some, but a lot of agencies don't. We'd like to have more. Because it not only, helps us in individual situations, it helps inform our training and our protocols, and we kind of synergistically look at how we deal with different situations by having them embedded with us. And if they get siloed, you miss key things, like the tragedy that we had. Some folks knew she was having a mental health breakdown, we didn't. And, if that information is co-located and shared, it then triggers different actions and responses to certain people or events that, are mental health driven. So, we're doing everything we can, but again, I think the state and federal government have walked away. When I became, and I think I've told you this before, when I became the sheriff, 8% of our population was on psychotropic meds, meaning they were medicated, they had such mental health challenges. Pre-COVID, we were in the 40s. The largest mental health provider in America is Los Angeles County Jail. That's a crime, in my opinion. That's not our wheelhouse. We do the best we can, but there needs to be more state and federal resources devoted to mental health. That's a crisis in the
Only Engler
community.
didn't defund mental health, damn.
So I have two more questions. My other question for you is, me and Marsha met with a group of sheriffs, captains, leaders in police departments from Pontiac all the way to, I think it was Ferndale. We had a meeting with them just to kind of discuss, and the only reason I'm bringing this up because it's involving we're dream crews. We met with them, we heard their concerns. I know you are well aware of this meeting, but I just wanted to hear from you because I have a lot of faith in you, Sheriff Bouchard.
No, thank you.
And I know that what they were suggesting when we left, that's something you did not agree with. And I just wanted to understand, and I'm okay with that because you all are the experts, but you did tell me and Marsha that you were gonna take that over and figure that out. So I was just trying to see if there's an update with what you all are planning, because the Dream Cruise is here.
So I think there was some discussion about an MOU. And that's the part that I didn't think was necessary because we already work hand in glove with every agency. And we already have mutual aid provisions under state law and all those in place. So a specific MOU, that's the part I didn't agree with. Working together, 100%. And after you had your meeting, I had all the chiefs to my office and we went through the different ticking points. It wasn't just the Dream Cruise, it was, as you know, drag racing.
Oh, the drag racing too, y'all. It was
Yeah.
to address, because
Yeah.
especially the last bad accident we had in Pontiac where people got
And that's
messed up.
the drag racing, the I wanna be fast and furious crowd moves around.
Yeah, they do.
So, some of this, we've seen stolen cars from other states, and then they have this kind of pop-up drag race spot, and this one terrible one was over Centerport Parkway area, and we ended up having a fatality. And lots of times we don't know when it pops up, or where, so you may be extra patrol in this spot, but now they put out it's gonna be over here. So we all have said if anything starts to develop like that, we'll send each other as much resources as possible, but here's the other, and this goes back to aviation. Almost none of us are chasing for traffic because of the liability and the danger. So as soon as, I can't tell you how many times we turn on our lights and the car rabbits. We're not chasing them for just traffic. If it's a felony or some dangerous situation other than traffic, then we weigh it. We have a command desk that makes a decision to order the termination of the chase or to allow it to continue based on all the factors in our very robust policy. The aviation there's never been a fatality in a police chase where aviation took control. Because what you do is you have the cars drop back, turn off your lights, leave it alone. We had a case where a guy was driving a motorcycle well in excess of 130 miles an hour. Our cars shut off the lights, the helicopter followed the guy. He parked it behind a bar in Auburn Hills, got out and went in, probably was high-fiving everybody in the bar. The helicopter was in an orbit, cars came in, snatched him out of the bar and towed his motorcycle. Nobody got injured, we didn't have to have a chase over it. So the helicopter allows us to do things when it deals with those kind of pop-up races. We can, without chasing somebody, follow to a spot where we can grab the car, grab the participants and hold them accountable. And the other final thing on that was there's a lot of noise complaints on Woodward. And pretty much the conclusion was there needs to be a change in state law because it's a very impossible to enforce decibel read, and you have to be next to the car and it has to be decibels, and so you just can't really, because you'll hear down Woodward and you get, the law is very specific about how you can rate a too loud or decibel violation. And so that has to be a state law thing.
Right, okay, my last question is, how is things going with I know you always want to try to put a curriculum and to help with the recruitment process of us getting officers, maybe straight out of high school. How is that conversation going? Is it still going good with the Pontiac School District or any other district? And if not, we can talk off for next steps.
It's still in discussion phases, both with Pontiac and I think Oxford had talked about a curriculum program too. We already have a cadet program that goes like from 14 to 19. And we obviously have lowered our age and things to try to bring people into the corrections division sooner than later. And we've been doing intensive recruiting in Pontiac and elsewhere. So it's an ongoing thing. I would love to have a curriculum that even if people ultimately don't want to go into law enforcement, they get an opportunity to see it, taste it, feel it, and go, a light bulb may go off. I mean, I never intended to be a cop. I was going to be a doctor. But, working with abused kids drew me in because I wanted to work with kids that were in trouble and being abused. If we can light that fire in somebody that they never thought about being a cop.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do.
Oh, and the last thing is, I wanted to say, there is some fees that we do have to pay with our sheriff's department. I serve on the Woodward Dream Cruise Committee, and they take care of whatever fees is with any of the police departments. That Woodward Dream Cruise, that whole event, they work that out. So it is some fees, but it is still worth looking into. And then when we did the Juneteenth parade, we did have some fees to cover for police and of course the drones that was there. So there is some type of fees there. It's not all just pro bono. At least and I just was saying that too, so if that is right, then we need to talk offline, because I got charged for everything. So, thank you, I'm done.
I have Commissioner Rahman, followed by Commissioner Smith-Charles.
Thank you. I want to go back to aviation for a quick minute here. Sure. So whether it's 3.5 million, whether it's 7 million, clearly it's a lot of money and it sounds like it's probably not happening tomorrow.
No.
My question for you is, you'd mentioned MSP has multiple units, and I'm presuming they're all in some level of use or whatever they do with them. Is there any opportunity for us to work in conjunction with them? I guess would be option A, right? If they have the vehicle or the personnel or something that they could potentially spare, and maybe we subsidize a cost or however that would work, because that would give us a more immediate result instead of having to wait. It sounds like there's a lot of events and a lot of need. So if we needed something next month, I don't know if that's already a ready option that we go to.
Yeah, I mean, we would call them if we don't have an airship available, absolutely. A lot of times it comes from a different part of the state. And so the impact, even if our people are off duty and they get called in from home, it's an hour for their operational by the time they drive there, do their pre-flight and get up and make an impact. So, having them in the air on patrol is where the difference happens. And they don't have the aircraft to be able to do that, other than they've assigned one to the city of Detroit and Detroit has theirs, so that's the other ones are more, I think, special needs, special purpose based.
Okay. And the other part of that is, do they reach a certain point in time where they decide, hey, we're gonna sell it off? So maybe instead of us having to buy a brand new one for 3 to 7 million, if we get something that's outfitted for maybe half the cost or whatever they go for, I have no idea, is there kind of a process in place for them to sort of sell off their old ones? And we could maybe get in and purchase one? I don't know.
Well, I mean, obviously, there's kind of a diminishing so the one thing about new ones is they've got a reduced operating cost. The cost to operate an older aircraft is like operating a 20-year-old car. You've got to take it in because you just lost your ball joints, and then all of a sudden you're, one thing after another. Same thing with a helicopter. A brand new one, for years, you don't have those expenses. It costs more to buy, costs less to operate. And so that's part of our balance. And if we bought a used one, we don't know, if some of those things are, all of a sudden we've got an unexpected cost.
Maintenance expense.
We obviously would sell ours to move to new ones and not have 4. So that's all part of this deliberative process, is how do we get the best bang for the buck for the taxpayers and still provide the service that clearly is needed and wanted by the community.
Sure, makes sense. I thought maybe there's a sweet spot, instead of 20 years old, maybe something at 10 years old, but I guess they may not have reason to sell it.
And
if
there's
it's only
very
10 years
expensive
old.
things at each benchmark too, like I don't know, the 10-year overhaul was like $800,000 or something. I mean, it's expensive when you get into years into an airship. When they're brand new, it's like a brand new car.
Right.
Check the oil, fill the gas. All of a sudden at 10 years, it's like, okay, you gotta replace the front end, and now your ball joints, now your brakes, and now your rotors, and now your, same thing with an aviation.
Got it, okay. And then last question I had for you, we were speaking earlier about mental health resource. How many professionals do we have in the mental health space right now?
Well, inside the jail, we contract obviously for mental health and healthcare services, so that's in their wheelhouse. Outside, we have one co-responder that's a full-timer, and then we have, as I said, multiple deputies that are focused on that, but they're not healthcare professionals.
Correct, but at least one.
That's why I said we'd love to have a state, I'm the head of government affairs for Major County Sheriffs of America. We've been telling Lansing and Washington, we would love to have more mental health co-responders paid for by the state or federal government to help us respond to these calls. It's an increasing number.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going every day to overdoses and suicides or suicide attempts every day.
But that's why I'm just trying to get a grasp, so we have one dedicated, true mental health trained person. Just one, for the whole department.
Yes.
For the whole department, inside, outside, all of it.
Yes. We do have at least 2, maybe 3 that are reserves, that are healthcare practitioners in their real life and come and donate a ton of hours and do that kind of stuff, but they're reserves.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith Charles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Always good to see you all. And my question was regarding, I had 3, but they'll be quick in terms of what I have to say, was the line item for the dogs. It looks like canine program is probably what I was thinking, but I'm just curious about like Officer Callie and all of her cool King Charles, I had to go Google what kind of dog she was, types are hard to find, and kind of costly, and I think they're adorable and I would love one. But I'm just curious, how does that fall into the budget, just the care for them?
I'll back up a little bit and give you how we got to the breed we have.
Okay.
So I actually talked to a professor of analytics and statistics, and he put kind of an analytical approach to what's the best dog breed, based on aggression, based on dander, based on all these different things, and came up with this breed. And then the follow-on, as I was looking at it, is if you look at a lot of the comfort trauma dogs, they're labs, they're setters, they're great dogs, love them, but they're bigger. And they're intimidating to young kids. Specifically, I remember an event in Pontiac that I was at, and this little girl was kind of standing off. She was about 6. She kept watching one of our dogs getting pet by all the other kids, and she kept moving a little closer and a little closer, and finally she kind of reached out and did a quick pet of the head, and then she got a little more comfortable, and the dad came over and said, she's deathly afraid of dogs. That's the first time in her life she's pet a dog. And I attribute that to the size and the disarming, I love you, come to see me kind of character of them. It allows us not only to not have a child be intimidated by the dog, but it lets us put them on a bed of a hospital bed when we visit pediatrics. When we visit senior centers, we can put them in the laps of people in a wheelchair. So they're a lot more utilitarian. In terms of the cost, the purchase of the dog and the startup equipment, I get donated. I have a charity that we have it donated to, and then we donate that back to the county once they're already acquired. So 100% of the cost to acquire these dogs was paid for by private citizens. And that's where the names come from. They, pick a name based on, or they offer a name based on, like Sadie, which I think is Pontiac. Sadie is the mother's name of the donor.
Okay.
Max, the gentleman that donated for him is a Max Burke Realtor. Zotter, car dealerships.
Oh, fun.
So, everybody kind of, different names come from our donors, and they pick up not only the acquisition cost of the dog, but also the startup, the equipment, and things like that. And for us, sometimes people say, why don't you go to a shelter? Just like our big snarly dogs, there's a very specific task that we have. And if we get one of them that bites somebody, now you're back to your liability. So from the particular breeder we've used for this program, they watch them as puppies. This one's a little too crazy, this one's a little too reserved. This one we think would be a good dog. And they keep watching them and they know their mission. They gotta be able to be trained, smart, not too reserved, but not crazy. And it's kind of a sweet spot. And so we get a lot of that intelligence, if you will, from the breeder. It says, we got 3, but only one is really ready, I think, to go into the mission of being this dog. And then we put them into training.
Well, the only disappointment I have is that you didn't bring one today for this.
I almost did.
Meeting.
Because no one can yell at me when I have one.
No, she could get right here. Restorative practices and overtime. You could take them in order that you prefer, but I did ask yesterday about overtime. It seems to still be a concern. You got a plan of attack for that?
Yeah, well, as you know, overtime is historically, going back many, many years in the Patterson world, we never got the money ultimately that we needed in overtime, and they would always true us up towards the end of the fiscal year. And the same is true. It's difficult to run within some of the numbers. But I can tell you, I know, on one sheet here. Oh, yeah. So, some of this stuff we can't predict or know. So, hospital watches, for example, if you have a local police department that arrests somebody and they're injured in that arrest or fleeing or whatever, and they're sent to the hospital, they become our charge once they're arraigned. They're ours, we own them. And so already year to date, fiscal 23, we have almost 19,500 hours of hospital watch, which are in overtime because those aren't budgeted positions.
Yeah.
But we don't know exactly how many hospital watch we get. And some of that varies too. We've had a lot of respectful but disagreements with some judges that maybe won't allow someone to come off of a sentence that is really undergoing some huge health challenges that we don't think is a danger to the public, but they have very costly medical and hospital watch. It requires 2 deputies 3 shifts a day. And so, those are things we can't predict or staff for. Children's Village Hospital watches, parental leave, STD, LTD, workers' comp. So far, all of those things combined have, in 2022, it was 53,000 hours, which would be the equivalent of 25 FTEs. So, and the hospital watches would be the equivalent of 9 FTEs. We did ask for a staffing study pre-COVID. We asked for it in this budget. It wasn't recommended by the executive, but we, at least on the correction side, we think we've got the Department of Corrections, State of Michigan, are willing to do a staffing study for us to tell us what might be the most cost-efficient way, because if it's 9 full-time positions versus a ton of overtime and burning people out, that may be a better way, both in terms of retention of employees and of cost point. So that's where a big chunk of our budget hits. It's non-predictable and it usually has to get trued up, and it's always been underfunded going back since I've been the sheriff.
That to me is what I would call a structural problem. Because, okay, this year you have so far 20,000 hours. They're not gonna be 0 next year.
100%.
They weren't 0 last year. I mean, there's some sort of chart you can make that tells us what the trend is, and it seems to me that it should be budgeted to some level. I don't think that we should pretend it doesn't happen and then we throw a bazillion overtime hours in. I think you're correct, we do need to budget for it. That will take, data and so on. I mean, the animal control came to us today for a similar situation, which I know you're aware of because it's the trustees and all of that.
Yes.
And we are going to figure out how to pay for that ongoing out of our budget and not take ARPA dollars and not, I mean, there's other grants and things we can look for and so on in the normal way of how we go about our business. But to hear you say we have nearly 20,000 hours of hospital patrol or, just standing there outside the hospital door that is not predicted, to me, that's an issue that we need to be thinking about
And
how it
that would
fits
fall
in.
under the correction staffing study, so at
Right.
least that part, hopefully we'll get a recommendation to give you that the state gives us.
That's good, that's what we need, is the data to tell us what really makes sense for us.
And you're right, this has been a structural thing going back, Brooks and Bob Dano and I would talk about this all the time. We're not gonna be inside this line because there's no way, this happens and we can't control it. Some overtime, we very much watch and try to, we just had discussions, the undersheriff with substation commanders, and you need to crimp this and tighten that and where we can, but we can't say, no, we're gonna leave that prisoner for homicide in the hospital unwatched.
Right.
If you look back historically, that's danger to the hospital and to the into the whole situation. There, a Pontiac police officer was killed on a hospital watch.
Yeah, so I look forward to the study results, I really do, that's important.
Yes.
Was that it?
I'll drop it at that. Maybe there's another time where it's very important to sort of practices, but others might be asking about it, but I do want to be mindful of the time, so thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hoffman's next.
Thank you guys very much. Of the 40 positions you just filled, if you ask each and every one of them, why did you apply for a job at Oakland County, what would they say? And the next part of that question is, what have we done, or you as Sheriff Department, to encourage more people to apply?
We're actively out in the community, even Coffee with the Sheriff we're setting up, or hey, think about this as a career. I go into every community and talk to people, and when we have new hires, a lot of times I'll say to the parents, got any more at home? So we're constantly working at trying to get more people interested, a more diverse pool interested. We go to different events. We've done recruiting at events in Burndale, at festivals and a variety of things. So, we're casting the net wider. We're trying to be quicker on the, provisional job offer. I think a lot of people want to come here because we try to be that beacon of best practices and best training and, most professional. I mean, Oakland County's got a lot of great agencies, and we try to be one of those agencies where people wanna come. Sometimes we lose them to other agencies because they have pensions. Like we had 4 on our staff in Pontiac, we lost to another agency because they had pensions still.
But 2 of them came back.
3 of them came back.
Yeah, they came back.
Because even though they had a pension, they realized.
They ain't like to work.
We like it where we were, we don't like the tiny, you know, the small area that we're patrolling, we don't. No, there's a lot, part of what sells Oakland County is we have so many choices. If you wanna be busy, you can work in one of our substations at Busy, Rochester Hills, Pontiac, they're busy. If you're a little burned out, you know, Addison, Oakland.
Your district, Bob's is the burnt out
It's a slower pace, you know,
Yeah.
we have, you know, crime lab, we have aviation, we have other kinds of things where people can aspire to be and take part in and still be in the same agency, so having career options is a big selling point for us.
Yeah, I think that would be huge. Do any of them ever say pay is okay or the benefits are good, or you ever hear anything like that, or I'm sure you lose people.
Yeah, we're not the top of pay and we don't obviously have the top of benefits, but we try to offset it with opportunities
That's
and with the appreciation, you know, that they feel the love and the appreciation of being here. You know, some agencies, I remember when I was in the police academy, they listed the top 3 stressors of a police officer, and I never forgot it. First was the courts, and second was their command, and third was the danger of the job. So, you know, if we can take the one out of there, so they understand that we, you know, we want them to be able to succeed, we wanna support them in their life goals and their family, and, you know, have a stable place to work, and if we can drop out of the top 3, I think that's a big component for recruiting people.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weipert.
Thank you. So we do have one helicopter working?
Yes.
Okay, so it's because one point it sounded like we were offline.
For a short period of time, the one had to go down for major because we were using it so much because the other one was down. And it hit its major repair.
Time to be, okay. And this could be HR, but every time I come, all the deputies that we use PT&E at court securities are always asked for more hours. You know, it's the 1,000-hour rule. I mean, is that?
That's federal government taxation.
Right. I mean, is there any looking into that? And,
I mean, we'd love to, if the federal government.
I get it. If we sought out any IRS opinions, whether we can.
Part-timers.
I think it's pretty well, I think even there was a court determination ultimately. I'll have to check, but I mean, I think it's pretty cemented that that's a federal thing that we don't have much control over. If all of you could change that, we'd be certainly appreciative, because that's one of our biggest challenges is having enough PT&Es to fill all of the requests.
All right, and yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I have a question related to something nobody else has brought up, so I will bring it up, but it's the only thing I'll bring up at this point. And that is the gun buyback program. We had the gun buyback program, and then we collected, say, 300 roughly weapons. And I'm told that the reason that we can't do any more gun buybacks is because we can't process the guns. So what do we have to do to fix that? Do we need to hire a forensic scientist out of Michigan State with one of your positions? Or are there other ways that, you know, we as the commission want to do more gun buybacks, and we have police departments that are waiting for us to be ready to do that. So how do we do that?
Well, I'll start a couple of things and the undersheriff wants to step in. The 2 biggest challenges there are storage space and scientific examiners. So obviously the first storage space, that becomes a challenge for the local police department. Southfield called me and they're out of space. They, you know, when they ask, do we have space? Well, we don't have space to start taking guns that are non-criminal from a lot of local police agencies. That goes to your subsidization question. We can't start storing things that have nothing to do with this and nothing to do with criminality. The timeline to get them tested, obviously, they fall very much into the back of the line because we're running priority on guns used in crimes. So those are the 2 biggest components. If we had more examiners, we obviously could do more examinations. The storage space from local communities, that's gonna be up to them, but go ahead and.
That was part of what I was gonna say, but also when I heard about the desire to do another one, I got a call from the Southfield chief inquiring. And I sent out an email shortly after talking to him. Our lab did tell us that they had processed all the guns from the gun buybacks, and it was only the ones that they had received. So I sent an email out to all the chiefs that participated, said, okay, we've processed all the guns that you brought to us. If you have more, start bringing them in. I've only heard back from Southfield so far, so I believe they've started to bring some. But all the other chiefs that replied said they were all set. So, but that does lead to the storage problem.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's some loose ends. If we wanted to really make a process that we can follow, because I know there's people out there that wanna know where they can turn in a gun in their home that they don't want anymore.
Just so it's clear, they can do that today.
People don't know that.
Well, but maybe that's an educational thing that we could undertake as a county.
They
They could bring it into our
20 years ago
substation
to turn
today
in a
and we can
rifle.
have it destroyed.
That's our
Gun
communication.
buyback is just an incentive for them, to pay them to get out of their house. But if
Right.
they truly, I don't want this in my house, my dad used to have it, or my grandpa, I don't want this in my house, they could bring it to their local police or us today, and it could be included in the destruction off to the state police now, for
Okay, well,
free.
maybe that's changed, cause 20 years ago, I tried to do that exact thing with a gun I found in my in-laws' house, right? I didn't even know he had it all those years. I was taking my kids and there's this big old rifle in the basement. And I tried to turn it into the Pontiac Police and I got a ration of grief about it and I just kept trying. I don't remember what we ended up doing with it. We got rid of it, but I think we need to make that process more available because people do see it as a potential piece of the solution of gun violence. If there's a gun in the home that nobody wants to be there, they want an easy way to know where to put it and we wanna be sure that if somebody turns in a gun, it is destroyed, not back in the market and so on. So I recognize we don't have a good process yet. We tried it once. We saw some issues with it. I'd like to see us work together.
Sure.
To try and institutionalize it better, cause I think it is important to a big part of the public. To try and get guns that don't need to be out there off the streets. So, Commissioner Cavell,
Yeah, well, just that,
we are over our time, so.
okay, well, I just am curious, what's
I
the
know.
difference between one person turning in like 5 guns from their basement and a gun buyback program turning in 5 guns a week or something? Like what you said, there's plenty of space, you said you can always come to a substation, you can always come to us, you can always turn in a gun. What fundamentally from your perspective then is the difference between turning in a gun from a gun buyback versus someone walking in? How does that change?
They're being compensated for a weapon that we don't know whether it's been used in a crime or not. So there's a little bit of investigation, where did this come from, was this registered, who owned it? And in gun buybacks, a lot of that's anonymous. But if you come in and say, this is registered to my grandpa, and now I'm the successor, I don't want this in my house, we can check the registration, you're the legal owner, it can be destroyed. If you come in and drop it on the desk and say, I want this out of my house, and I'm not telling you who I am, and we find out that gun's stolen, and it was used in a homicide.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest difference, is we can do a little bit of.
But our buyback wasn't anonymous, remember? We were on the phone about it, it wasn't anonymous.
Right, but what I'm saying is you're still taking in weapons in those buybacks that they may not be the registered owner of. And other kinds of things that make it simpler for us to do on a daily basis, other than a buyback. Because they come in and they are the legal owner of a weapon. And a lot of the buybacks, they're not the legal owner.
Right. Okay, well, we are 15 minutes past our time. I didn't wanna do that, but you are our biggest department in terms of expense and people and
We're 40
all that,
minutes
so you
past.
deserve to have a little more time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the
4:05, yeah, we're
conversation
40
and
minutes.
your report.
Oh, it's 4:30? Oh.
Yeah, we're only 15 minutes over. Really appreciate you being here.
Appreciate the time.
I think everybody on the commission likes these sessions because we learned so much, and we do have a dialogue, which is really great, so.
And we're happy to, you know, I mean, come to your caucuses or anytime.
Yeah.
You got questions, we get, if we don't have the answer.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask you quickly, you mentioned you do the outreaches in the different communities. Is there a way for us to know when and where those are? Cause I'd love, if you're in Commerce, I mean, I'm sure everybody in their own respective areas. But like I cover Commerce Township, which I know that the sheriff's office covers. So if you're in that area.
I go to areas that aren't covered by us.
Oh, okay.
I go to the whole county because I represent the whole county.
Oh, sure, okay.
So I was in Oak Park, I think, last, and Royal Oak before that. So I'm all over the place, because I wanna hear from everybody, because even if we're not your primary police agency, we're a support agency.
Right.
And you pay county taxes and I'm your employee.
I saw 8 sheriffs outside the suburban showplace the night Donald Trump was here, so, and I called
Yeah.
Under Sheriff Childs to ask him about who pays for those.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's
But
my
you
job.
wouldn't have if it was someone else. You
And what's the
wouldn't know.
answer? No, we would've, we
What
would've.
was your answer?
Kidding.
Your
President
answer
Biden.
was that
Yeah.
we do that
It was
for
Biden.
any federal
But that's a president, so I think it's
person
just
who is in the area and
yeah,
needs
it's
the
covered.
support.
More of that mutual aid, damn.
And that's been a pet peeve of ours on the, you know, again, as the government affairs chair for Major County Sheriffs of America, every year they put extra money into the Secret Service budget of a presidential election cycle.
But they don't.
And there's nothing for the locals, so if we get a visit by President Biden and Vice President Harris and then Trump and then, you know, whoever,
Drove right by my house.
that's us and we get no compensation, but we have to cover.
Right.
So, and
Wow.
Oakland County is super busy, I mean, I remember when President Obama came, we had, you know, I can't tell you the numbers because, you know, that's part of the, we had a lot. You know, especially when you got a sitting president, it
Right,
just
that's what I'm saying,
really
yeah,
sucks
more.
our resources.
And
And the Secret Service can't do it without us.
Yep, yeah,
They
they'll
just
be
can't.
back. So to Audrey's point, are we able to get someone to
Be cool.
send us when you're in our communities? 'Cause
Yeah, so it's easy peasy. So what we typically do is when we set coffee with the sheriff, we always tell the local chief if it's not in a patrol area of ours. I'll just make sure that we also notify the commissioner.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
My chief will not call me.
Yeah, that's,
Both ways.
that's super easy.
Just, you know, be
Yeah.
able to-
So going.
Yeah.
What's the public service?
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
We don't.
I'm so glad I have staff to keep me
Public
honest.
comment, talk to public.
Alright. Well, I think that is it from the sheriff's
I've done that
department.
before.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just gotta get out, warm weather.
Freezing to where it tells me.
black.
Anyway.
I must say, I know black, that's a
You're just gonna send them
Yeah, they should.
Okay, last item on the agenda.
Commissioners.
Well, last night, no.
Thank you.
I went to Memorial.
Last item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody from the public who cares to address the finance committee at this time?
We're making dinner.
Seeing no one, I'll call public comment closed. And are there announcements or other business?
For announcements, I just want to remind staff commissioners, so for the rest of these, we are scheduled to go until 4:30. We build ourselves a little bit of cushion.
I'm just kidding.
So I
I'm
just wanted you to
freezing. I
know
just wanna
though
go
in
get
scheduling
warm.
your
That's why she
days.
said 15
Yeah,
minutes.
so we do schedule these
Ah.
to go until 4:30, so
I thought you
although,
was fibbing.
Right. Yes, ma'am?
I just wanted to recognize fiscal services, this fiscal services.
Yes, and they have been here all day.
Been here all
Thank you so much.
They like bills off or anything, so I just wanna shout y'all out.
They're being punished.
Yeah.
With that, I will call this meeting adjourned at 5:00.
That is true, and they stayed sitting there the whole time.